That's good.
Should we get Bruce?
Ready?
Yep.
All right, call the meeting to order at 6:01. And let's all rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Alicia, you want to do roll call, please?
Sure. Steve Dagalow. Ian McDonald.
Here.
Lori Blargen.
Here.
Lacey Oster. Here. Bruce Blargen.
Here.
Danny Erickson. Here. Matt Foucault.
Here. All right, our district mission, together we engage, educate, and empower all learners, bridging their passions through pathways to create successful futures and positively contribute to our local and global communities. We have our core values listed and our protocol reminders also listed. The other thing I just want to, before we start with this, if you fill out a red card or you want to make a public comment, can you make sure you fill out a red card and bring it up here before we get started, if anyone hasn't yet, so. Okay. All right, so I have one.
I think they have one more red card. Grab one pen right now.
Okay, so right now we have 11, from what I understand, 11 people from Somerset to give public comment. Then we also have 1, 2, 3, 4, plus we have a fifth call-in who's not from Somerset, or don't, I believe, don't have kids within the district. So the first one is, do we want to allow, or do we want to take our public comment and lengthen it over 20 minutes, or do we want to keep it at 20 minutes? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Our policy says 20 minutes.
I'd like to extend it so everybody's heard.
Does anyone have any other thoughts?
Done in the past.
Yeah, I'm good extending it.
Okay, so we extend it then? Okay, so our second topic is, since we have 11 people already from Somerset, do we want to extend it to 5 additional people who aren't from our district to hear what they have to say as well? Anybody have any thoughts?
I have a note about that. I was one who asked somebody to speak out of the district. Her name is Sarah Parshall-Perry. She is a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., where she focuses on civil rights, constitutional governance, regulatory policy, and the proper role of the courts. Prior to that, she was former senior counsel to the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education, where she focused on policy reform, technical guidance, and the department's annual report to Congress, among others. It cannot be emphasized enough what an incredible honor this is for our school board to hear her speak tonight. She is a national speaker and she's an expert in constitutional law and Title IX revisions. Please consider her public comment.
Anybody else?
Well, you know, this is why I brought forward our public comment policy, and I think we need to, I can't remember, is this one on the agenda for tonight
Yes.
still?
Yeah.
So I think when we approve these policies, we need to address this moving forward so that we're consistent.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like we'll go through, we'll just let everyone go ahead with this. I'll have Colin and Sarah last. Just get through everyone who's here, and then we'll call her. All right.
Do you want to approve the agenda first?
Yeah. So, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I will make a motion to approve the agenda with the following modification, that we remove item A, 8A11, which reads, recommend that the school board approve the 24-25 preliminary budget as presented. There is no budget presentation. It's informational only, so we will not be approving anything tonight.
Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approve the agenda. All right, so I guess we'll just,
It's getting pretty packed out there, so we need to be able to hear.
got it.
Come on in, you guys.
All right, here we go. So, just because we do have a lot of public comment tonight, when we get started, please start by, if you're making public comments, state your name, state your address, and the topic for which you are addressing. Lacey will give you a warning at 2 minutes and 45 seconds. She'll hold her hand up or say something to get your attention. And then at 3 minutes, will be cut off and go to the next person. Also, just, we have a lot of people here. We have a lot of people with a lot of thoughts, so just please keep your comments professional. We're role models to our students, children, and community. Show them how we interact when we have these difficult conversations. So, I'll start first. Allison.
We have one meeting? Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Excuse me, can I start again? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Allison Carrico, 1730 112th Street, Nourishment. I'm here to encourage the board to reject the unlawful revisions of Title IX. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. 37 straightforward words. A 52-year-old civil rights law is now unconstitutionally being rewritten to an astounding 1,500 pages. The consequences of such a rule change would be monumental. It removes due process protection for students accused of sexual misconduct and favors gender ideology over free speech. It deprives girls and women of privacy, safety, and opportunities. It contradicts state law in 21 states that protect students and prevent male athletes from competing in women's sports. It negatively impacts educational and career opportunities for women. It harms childhood development by redefining sex and gender. Our children depend on us for truth and guidance. Ideology is dangerous to young developing minds. Forcing our children to pretend their eyes are deceiving them and punishing them for not complying to someone's ideology is not only wrong, it's evil. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. Teach a youth about the ways he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. I stand strong, unwavered with boldness, truth, and righteousness. My feet sandaled with readiness, walking as a child of light to protect his children, our children, my children, now and forever. I am sent me. God bless you all.
Thanks, Allison. Next one, Sean McCurran.
Full school board members and everyone present tonight. My name is Sean McGurran and I live at 441 County Road VV, Somerset, Wisconsin. My wife and I have lived in Somerset for the past 26 years of our lives. We've been blessed with 5 children over the course of our marriage, 2 of whom have graduated from Somerset High School in the past 5 years. We truly love our community here in Somerset and have made many good friends. We appreciate the aspects of life here in a small town that allow our family to grow and become part of the fabric of this community. I'm in front of you tonight to speak about Title IX and the revisions recently made, which I strongly disagree with. Title IX was originally passed and signed into law in 1972 by President Richard Nixon at the time. The original intent was to allow for equal opportunity of women in sports, both in access and equality. Most recently, Title IX has altered the meaning of the word sex, meaning male and female, to obscure language that includes sexual orientation and gender identity. These changes directly affect all of our children, including young men and young women, that would allow biological males in young women's bathrooms, changing areas, private spaces, and potentially even locker rooms in our high schools and lower grades. Also on the horizon is the possibility of accusations of sexual harassment from misgendering individuals who feel that they must identify as being of the gender opposite their biology. I appeal to all board members as well as fathers and mothers here tonight to choose to protect all of our children's safety, privacy, and opportunities in our schools by not supporting these changes. Since our public schools receive federal funding, I'm sure there is tremendous pressure to follow these new and revised changes to Title IX. I urge our school board and all parents to stand strong and not allow funding to be a deciding factor in protecting and keeping all of our children safe. Additionally, there are currently 8 lawsuits drawn against the current administration, with 26 states that have signed on to those lawsuits. The rule is on hold in 14 states currently. With this knowledge, I implore the school board to delay its vote next Monday, July 22nd. Also, to learn more about the Title IX changes specifically in sports and the impact that has already been seen at the college NCAA level, you can YouTube the former Division I swimmer named Riley Gaines. She swam for the University of Kentucky and articulately discusses her experiences in competing against a biological male by the name of Leah Thomas. I thank you all for your time this evening.
Thanks, Sean. What's going on, Alicia?
Your guess is as good as mine.
You should, because the battery had a red X on it. Is it plugged in
I mean,
to the,
which part?
it's a cable. When it was up, the battery on the bottom of the right hand corner, the right X, like it was gonna die.
I know they did cleaning and stuff in here. I don't know if something that.
It's still going on live stream.
Is it still up?
It's not.
No, is the live stream still up? Yeah? I don't know.
There it is. Good
Oh,
job.
sorry, bear with me here.
Where's that power cable hanging? Where's that power cable hanging?
Yeah, it's just your back.
Very low.
See it hanging right there?
Oh, over here? Oh. Is that what you're talking about, Abby?
Yeah, well, on the screen, you have a red X on your back. There you
There
go.
we go.
Rolling now.
All right. Hold on. Okay.
Good?
I think
All
so.
right.
I think it's good, still good.
Okay. All right, Angela Bowman.
Good evening. My name is Angela Bowman. I live at 1981 62nd Street, Somerset. I'm here to express my concerns with the Title IX revisions in our schools. Somerset schools were short roughly $1 million due to low enrollment. Last year, we were short over 100 students and currently short by at least 100 for next year. However, we do not know the reasons for low enrollment. I'm guessing that it's not because of our school ratings. This shortage may increase depending on how the school board will vote on July 22nd. In my opinion, a complete overhaul of ideology is needed to take back the education of our students. Let's spend our tax dollars on education in which these boys and girls need to be productive adults in our community, and let's not conform to the political mess that society is pushing everyone to do. Students need to be educated, not influenced. As a taxpayer and former teacher, we need to take back education, protect the boys and girls of our community, and please vote no to these Title IX revisions.
Thank you. Travis Schockner.
Sorry, I'm young. I came here to talk about something else, but if this Title IX stuff is such a big deal, does that mean if it passes that I can wipe the losses to women on my high school career off my record for the high school? I mean, I could. That's the thing, right? I don't have to didn't count women as part of the sport of wrestling that I was in. This is an embarrassment for the world, much less our community. We are the American exceptionalism is we do the wrong thing all the time. We are the exception because we are the only country that's making such a big deal out of men's bathrooms, girls' bathrooms. I've traveled the world. It is embarrassing when you walk in and you go to our country, listen to our politicians and everybody else, and they're complaining about bathrooms and locker rooms, and you go to someplace else and they're like, why is this a thing? This is people are people. And you can go to places around the world, and in the bars, it's shared bathrooms and just sit down toilets. Pick which one, do your duty, go away. If it's the locker rooms themselves, you can set up changing stations. That is what they do around the world. This political pizza argument of all this stuff is pure distraction from the real problems. We can't afford our schools because people are leaving our communities. We can't afford our schools because we're underfunding all of our schools due to the tax write-offs to rich people so they can throw it in a bank in the Bahamas and make money off of the money that should be going to our students. And we're falling into the trap of, oh, but the trans rights thing must be a thing. It's embarrassing that adults are having the conversation that 5-year-olds settle with each other. This Title IX stuff we should just move forward, but it's closed-mindedness that keeps the conversations from happening. And it's in every freaking part of our discussion and body politic. If you want abortion rights, if you want to address abortion rights, we are America. We are the melting pot of the world. You should look at the country that's doing it the best, who has the lowest rate, and you follow what they do. What do they do? If you go to Iceland, which is like a 1% abortion rate, in-depth sex education, free healthcare for basically everybody. They give their mothers paychecks to stay home, to take care of their kids. This discussion as a whole is embarrassing. And we need to get over ourselves so we can hold real people accountable for what they're failing us to do.
Thank you. Danielle Johnson, you're up.
Hi, my name is Danielle Johnson. I live at 1575 150th Street in New Richmond. I am the Democratic candidate for Assembly District 28. And I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself tonight. I am a veterinarian and I own a business in Baldwin. And when I think of education, I think the two biggest things that come to mind about what we need in Wisconsin related to education is fairness. And we have a long history of fairness in education in Wisconsin. I had the opportunity to be an election worker for several elections, and I live technically in Erin Prairie, and so it's one of those old schoolhouses that's just plainly on G. You can see it just in the middle of cornfields. And I learned when I was an election judge that schoolhouse, that there was a mandate in Wisconsin that says that they had to have schoolhouses no more than 4 miles apart so that kids did not have to walk more than 2 miles to school and back. And I was really struck by that, and will always remember that, because it really speaks to how important fairness is in education. These days, it's a little bit different than whether the farm kids get the same education as the city kids, and our discussions are slightly different, but I think the main theme is the same. The other aspect, as a business owner, I think continuity of education is extremely important. When I hire someone with an education, with a veterinary degree or a vet tech certificate, I have a basis to know what they know. And when we have this continuity in education is really important, so that as a society, we have certain expectations that can be fulfilled when we're hiring and things like that. And so related to school vouchers are do not help with the fairness situation, and they do not help with the continuity of education. I think the issues that we're talking about with fairness in Wisconsin these days have a lot to do with funding. I've heard comments related to making sure that the schools have enough money. And people, as I'm knocking on doors and talking to people, they're really tired of referendum and every dime being squeezed out that we can with their taxes. So if elected, I would really work towards more state funding for all of our schools to be able to, once again, speak to that fairness as well. Understanding that there's a lot going on related to the Title IX, but we know, and I firmly believe
10
that
seconds.
students, no matter their race, religion, gender, or economic background, deserve equal education. And when that happens, we're better off as a society because of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Erica Johnson.
I kind of step on it. Okay. Erica Johnson, 1999, County Road C. Good evening. I speak in strong support of the Title IX and its critical importance in our educational institution. Title IX was enacted in 1972, but is not frozen in time. It has had many revisions, the latest of which was in 2020, when the Trump administration put rules created to help the men's rights groups. And are rooted deeply in offensive stereotypes. But it stands as a landmark civil rights law that prohibits sex-based discrimination in any educational program or activity that receives federal funding today. First and foremost, Title IX ensures equal access to educational opportunities regardless of gender. It guarantees that every student has the right to participate in sports clubs, and other extracurricular activities without fear of discrimination based on their sex. And this only fosters more inclusion and equitable learning environment, but also teaches our students the values of fairness and respect. Now, I could go on and tell you about Title IX and all the stuff that it does that increases the ability for women to get into the STEM areas by creating fairness. But let's talk instead, if the district fails to follow Title IX regulations, several consequences can arise. Loss of federal funding. We're all about the budget, right? And funding. Well, Department of Education can pull our funding from it. Legal action and lawsuits. There are probably parents and children that can sue us for not following this, and it's a civil rights violation. Negative publicity and community backlash. And the impact on the students' well-being. So ignoring or mishandling complaints of sexual harassment or discrimination can have serious consequences for the affected students, and that includes transgender people. So we've already lost one civil rights lawsuit in this from a racial claim, from people being horrendously bullied and our staff not doing their job and addressing it, and we had to settle that. And each one of these lawsuits is going to be tens of thousands in lawyer fees, and then the damages that we could possibly pay out. If you want to bankrupt our school, this is a very good way to do it, by not following Title IX. So why don't you think, as one of the school board members said, they want to treat this like a business. Why would you do that? How would you follow this by not following Title IX? You're losing your funding, you're opening yourself to lawsuits, and you're discrediting yourself, and you're a laughingstock.
Time's up.
Bye.
Thank you. Patricia Gearman.
I'm Patricia German, and I live at 118 172nd Avenue, Somerset. I have five children, not my children, grandchildren in your school. And there is other options for the parents can take kids out of their school and teach themselves, like I did for 3 years, and then I put them back in, say, at Hudson High School, and I became a member of the school board. So you have that option too. And also in 1969, before Title IX, I was in high school, and I fought as a girl to be able to have a girls' basketball team. And do you see what I look like? I couldn't have played on any boys' team. And so there, and if some boy decided to say he was a girl, I would have been out. And I fought. I mean, that's what's happening. We fought, and that's what Title IX is about. Is so that girls could have a team. So girls could go out and have a team together. Now, we got our team before I left high school, 70, 69, 70, 71. Still there today. I don't know. I don't understand this. Girls are girls, boys are boys. Maybe we can have a place for these special children. I have a grandchild that's a special child, okay? I'm sorry, you can put them in another category then, because they're not the same. Boys aren't the same, girls aren't the same, and these children are not the same. They need respect, they need help. I read on your thing today, and I went through all those things. And some of you're talking about you need mental health. How do you teach children these days reading, writing, arithmetic if the teacher is all concerned about their mental health, their social environment, their children they're not teaching them. There's no time for teaching. These children need to be taught education. Parents can help with the mental health. There's some help out there. We take care of that. Now, I don't know what to
10
say,
seconds.
except that bathrooms, locker rooms need to be safe for all children. I mean, there's boys that are raping girls around our country.
Time's up.
In the rooms. We've got to
Thank you,
stop
Patricia.
this.
All right, Timothy Holden.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I appreciate it. I'm from New Richmond, and I know that's not the school district, but it is a national issue. It's not just here, you know. When Title IX came in, I'm almost 69. When Title IX came in 72, it was a great thing, you know. It enabled the girls to have their own teams and so forth, and it's a great thing. About 5 years ago was the first time I really became aware of the sexual preference question. And a friend of mine, her daughter, came home from school in Hudson, 11 years old, and I just asked her, what'd you learn in school today? Well, they asked us what our sexual preference was. They didn't even talk to the parents. What about parents' rights? So, you're probably wondering, well, he's 69, his kids must be growing, right? They are, thank God. But I have 2 grandkids in the Hudson area here. And I'd ask you, would you have your daughter or son or grandkids transgender? Would you allow that? I'm asking you, everybody here. And so I'm totally against the revamping of Title IX. It's a perversion and another downward spiral of what's happening to our society. And It's pure evil. And I don't know if you saw Boston Hospital about a year ago or so, when the surgeon put up on YouTube, did you catch it before there was so much outcry and they pulled it off of there? Did you see it? How this transgender thing takes place? And it was a girl, young girl. And they took something out of her leg to make something. Are you blinding yourself to this reality of how this is done? I'm asking you. Or is this just something that is trendy? I drove for Handy Lift, if you're familiar with that, non-emergency medical transport. And one of the gals was transcending. And she wasn't completely there yet. But she was so messed up, you wouldn't believe it. And she was going to a therapist in New Richmond. And
10 seconds.
totally unstable. I felt so bad for her. I'm just telling you, I think you need to look into this surgery procedure. And I hope some of you saw the Boston Hospital
All right, thanks, Timothy.
YouTube surgery.
Timothy.
There was such an outcry
That's-
that they
hey.
pulled it off.
Please, that's enough. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
David Woolner, you're up.
David Woolner, 490 Forest Drive, Somerset, Wisconsin. Not only as a resident of the area, I've been a high school varsity coach, both in boys and girls hockey. And I can tell you that from running my summer camps, my player development, no girl can compete against a guy. There's sports they can play at, but physical sports, they tend to get hurt. I have a daughter that has a neck injury from her sophomore year that's haunting her now today at 47 years old. Any male coming in, Lee Thomas, Will Thomas, his real name.
Yeah.
Look up the Riley Gaines story and others with it, and you'll see transgenders are they're not transgenders. They're fully biological males that take hormones. After so long they can compete against women. They're smashing records, setting new records. The Olympics got it right. The Olympics said no to Thomas. Period. And I'm ashamed to be in front of this board to talk about this. That this is an issue. It's disgusting. The biggest threat to us here is our Constitution. There's an evil force out there that is attacking our Constitution, trying to break it down. Everybody here has an First Amendment right to do and be what you want to be, to religiously preach and receive your God in the way you believe, to be who you want to be. That's your right. But don't push it on me. My right is to do what I want to do. I'm actually sick and tired of this. I've interviewed some of these school board members and said to them, here's some of the books we have here. Can you read it to me? They didn't want to. It's a slippery slope. It started with the books in our school library. I asked my son who graduated from here 2 years ago. He goes, yeah, we knew they were there. We didn't read them. We're talking trucks, fishing, and hunting. That's what I want my boys talking about. And what the girls want to talk about is good. I mean, I want them to be girls. I want them to be boys. I want them to have a life in the school system where they're safe. And you let this stuff into this school, I guarantee I'll be the first lawsuit against you. 18 years of coaching high school sports and working in the programs, it's like, what a joke. I can't even believe it's on the agenda. Stand up, Somerset, and demand the rest of the state to follow us and end this crap. Because it's our Constitution that's under attack, and they're breaking it down little by all this strange stuff. I almost swore. But I'm telling you, it's over. Otherwise, you'll find my name on the first lawsuit. I'm tired of it.
Next up, Lee Parks.
Oh, this is gonna be fun. Yeah, I quit doing backflips 20 years ago. My name is Lee Parks. I live at 845 Plum Tree Lane, Somerset, Wisconsin. Number one, I was told to shut up back there. Do you know what the First Amendment says? I can say whatever I want to say. You don't have to like it, but I get to say it. Now, this Title IX nonsense is not constitutional. It has not gone to the House of Representatives and the federal government. It has not been ratified by anyone other than bureaucrats. It is going to go to the Supreme Court. Now my question to each of you here is, do you want to be on the right side of history, or do you want to be on the wrong side of history? You have to understand something. There are going to be lawsuits taking place. You are a hard act to follow. XX, XY. XX equals woman. XY equals man. Men have stronger muscles because of testosterone. Men have larger bone structures because of testosterone. Women cannot, under any circumstance, compete against a man. This nonsense that's trying to be passed here in this county is going to cause lawsuits that you are not going to be able to stand up to. We need to understand our girls are girls. Our boys are boys. My granddaughter goes to the middle school. She lives with her grandma and me. I will not stand without saying that this unconstitutional nonsense is going to go to the Supreme Court. It will be turned over. 26 states are considering it. 14 states have stopped it. And we need to understand that our children are not for sale. Amen. Our children should never, ever, ever be put into a position where they have to compete against the opposite sex. I cannot express it enough. XX, XY. You may be able to get an operation, you might be able to take hormones, you might even be able to get surgeries, but if you get off those hormone treatments, you're going to go right back to XX and XY. It's a biological impossibility for a woman to be a man and a man to be a woman. I'm done.
Frank. Frank from Woodville.
It is a disgrace to be here. Never thought in my
Can you say
wildest
your
dream.
name and address before you start, please?
Frank Rushnout, Woodville, Wisconsin. Never dreamed in my wildest imagination we'd be discussing this crap. But welcome, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. With my extensive knowledge of the barnyard, I only find two genders. Believe it or not, it is male and female. I even checked the dictionary, then checked to see if the roosters were starting to lay eggs. They must not be drinking enough federally mandated chemical-laced city water yet. Due to the lack of morals, misfit evil animals have been allowed to rob the children of a future of optimism, freedom, and prosperity, along with a World Cup class education. For what the crap education system costs the taxpayers, you would think USA would be number one. Sad to say, it is producing very little. As far as the Biden mandate allowing boys into girls' sports, locker rooms, bathrooms, etc., it is unconstitutional. It was not passed into law by Congress. A first-year law student should know that. As far as losing federal funding for not allowing it in the district, first off, there's more than enough fat on the pig to cover the loss. Second off, the district will probably save most of that money, if not more, not being under the thumb of the stupid, incompetent, corrupt, massive bureaucracy of the federal education system. In my opinion, it is also unconstitutional. Education should be up to the states. Abolish the teachers' union so the teachers can start teaching something useful again. Any administration, staff, teachers, board members that think this is okay to allow boys and girls sports, locker rooms, bathrooms, need to resign due to the lack of morals and zero common sense of right and wrong. The children don't need you to further screw them up. I think we need to call Dr. Phil for group therapy on America before there is no return to even a small amount of common sense and moral decency. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Carol. Sorry.
Hi, my name's Carol Ivance. I live in Hudson, but it's also in St. Croix County, and hopefully this won't spread, but gotta start somewhere. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I was noticing that your protocol reminders include the following: that you will make decisions that are in the interest of all students. I assume that this includes the female students, and that you will display integrity, honesty, and respectfulness. I'm also assuming this means that reality and truth are highly valued and sought after. And I'm here to talk about the Title IX thing, if that's not obvious. On the agenda, it says non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education, programs, or activities. So it seems that maybe a definition of sex would be important here. The American Heritage Dictionary, the 5th edition, says sex is defined as, quote, either of the two divisions designated female and male by which most organisms are classified on the basis of their reproductive organs and functions, unquote. In basic biology, as someone already brought up, we learned that human females have 2 X chromosomes, while human males have an X and a Y chromosome in practically every cell in their body. Putting on lipstick and high heels doesn't change that fact, and neither does surgery. And I agree, these people are very wounded and they need our help. And giving them, forcing them into surgery doesn't help them. Truth is what they need, and they need to learn. All students need to learn how to think, not what to think. In the recent federal Title IX changes, which are completely unconstitutional and totally unrealistic and unnecessary, there's no reason to change Title IX to, what someone said, 1,600 pages. It's a fake law by the federal government. It isn't something anyone needs to even think about following because it's unconstitutional, for starters. The Constitution is the law of the land, and that is what I believe you all took an oath to uphold. So this is a non-starter for that reason. Besides being in the realm of fantasy, it only causes division and confusion. It certainly is not in the interest of the females in the schools, which are roughly half the population that you were here to serve. Don't let any government or agency bully you. If they're not doing their job, you need to push back.
Carol.
Oh,
Thank you. Brady Penfeld.
I'm more people in here. Yeah, my name's Brady Penfield. Live in River Falls, so this isn't my district, and I already graduated high school. For those who thought I'm still in school in Pelican. Yeah, so my name's Brady Penfield. I am one of the Republican candidates for the 28th Assembly District. You heard from the Democrat candidate earlier this evening, but that's not the reason why I'm here. I already spoke to the school board last month, so I just want to start off by thanking all the parents that showed up here thank them for having the courage to stand up for their children and ensure that they will remain safe in the public school system. I just want to say that these Title IX changes hijacked the original intent. We heard earlier, it was only 37 words or somewhere around there is what the original message is, and now it's been overinflated and it's completely unnecessary. And to address a comment that was mentioned earlier too, these changes are rolling back Title IX rules that were in place during the Trump administration, not the other way around. So just want to clear that up too. But what I'll say is that this Title IX bill puts girls in dangerous positions. They'll be susceptible to bodily harm physically or through other means that, as we have seen in the news, sexual assault is included in that. This is something that we cannot allow to happen in our public school systems. It will happen K-12 and college, or sorry, UW system, and I go to UW River Falls, so we already have a wing in one of the dorms, so actually a whole floor the bathrooms are open to anyone of that community, meaning men and women already can commingle in those restrooms. And I remember the first time I actually went in there, I couldn't even believe my eyes that actually existed on the college campus. So as a man who does not partake in that, I was thoroughly disgusted and horrified, honestly, that even exists already on the college campus. But if you do not stand up now and have the courage to protect your children, what will make you stand up? The children are our most vulnerable. If you're not willing to stand up and protect them right now, what will do that? Will it be money? Will it be some other means? No, that can't be right. Our children are our most vulnerable, and that is why we must take a stand this evening. I'm calling on the board explicitly to table this bill, to allow one more meeting so we can have even more community members show up, and that public notice can, we can have maximum publicity for residents of Somerset and school board, and parents with kids in the Somerset School District, because this is something that cannot go under the radar. It needs to be, this is something that cannot be covert. It needs to be out there. And it says that the precedent has already been set. There have been over 24 states that have filed lawsuits. So this is just one school board, but the precedent has been set, so there's no reason, as we heard earlier, the Constitution gives us this right to do so.
5 seconds.
And what I'll say once again is that I will protect your children and ensure this can never be a reality as your future representative. My name is Brady Penfield, so thank you for your time and God bless.
Paul Hamilton.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Hamilton. I live in Hudson, 1309 3rd Street. I am running for State Senate District 10, which is a brand new map now. It used to run north. Now it starts kind of here in Somerset, goes all the way down toward La Crosse, Trumpeau County. So I'm here to introduce myself. Very interesting meeting to be at. I appreciate people's free speech rights. I'm an advocate for that myself. Free speech, of course, leads to consequences, and when we exercise our free speech rights, there are always consequences. I appreciate, as a teacher, I spent 20 years as a teacher working with special ed students, kids that had emotional behavior problems, as well as working in middle school and at high school, and I taught English in those grades. I taught in Baldwin Woodville. Some folks here may have run into me in another context because I worked for the teachers union. Represented teachers all over this part of the state, including Somerset. Spent a lot of time off and on over the years with the school board in Somerset. And I can tell you from a ground up point of view that we have some of the best schools in the whole state. This part of Wisconsin is really extraordinary. I live in Hudson now. We have top level grads coming out of those schools. Baldwin Woodville, my own children graduated from there. They're a lawyer, 2 engineers. Our schools here are fabulous. And my impression of the staff here at Somerset, when I was working with them, as well as even currently, and the students and of the graduates, is we have extraordinary schools here. We need to actually stop and think about that. They're great. School funding is an issue. I learned a little about that over my last years working with schools. 1993, I'm going to make this real short, we froze school funding in place, and we did not give it any way for it to grow other than to ask property taxpayers in districts like this, in Hudson and Baldwin, Woodville, and other places, just to stay alive, to keep going back to tax. I'm oversimplifying, but that's what happened. And one of the challenges we have is rural schools right now are not funded right. And that's one of the things I want to go and work on with, in a nonpartisan, shared values way, because our public schools are the heart of a lot of our communities. That's why you folks care so much about what's happening here. Your schools are the heart of your communities. I believe in that, very much so. I also believe that as a teacher, I took every kid who came to my class. You know what? It didn't matter if I liked them. It didn't matter if I agreed with them. It didn't matter if they were black or white, what their religion was. My job as a teacher was to work with them all and find their gifts and find their talents. That's what I will do as a legislator. I believe that we need to get back to common sense, working on things together. Thank you.
All right, Harley. Last name on here.
Hello everyone, my name is Harley. I'm St. Croix County.
State your last name, please.
Saint. And the district administrator gets paid too much just for one, so we'll get that out of the way. All right, radical far left Democrats
Get your
change.
address too, please.
Just for you, 1964 West 7th Street. You're invited.
In the Richmond?
Yep, right by the hospital. Thanks for, I want my time back for that too. The far left radical Democrats changed this Title IX in April this year to allow an adult, 18-year-old senior with a 14-year-old minor to be allowed in the same locker room together. So I hope the school's got a lot of millions of dollars for a lawsuit ready. Because in Virginia, you lost that, as you lost the governor position, Loudoun County. They sued for $30 million. So we'll see some more lawsuits, I'm sure. And we talk about, sexual conduct and how to treat, someone with gender dysphoria. We should address that. You shouldn't just allow a boy that's pretending to be a man. Right now I'm Harlena, by the way. I don't live at West 7th anymore. I identify as a girl now and I don't live there. So, who knows? You're gonna have an 18-year-old in a locker room that's a senior who's gonna be graduating with a minor in that locker room together. How does that make any sense? Let alone a bathroom too. And I understand there's a stall door that you can shut, but in a locker room your genitals are exposed. So, the whole let's share the bathrooms doesn't really solve anything when you can close the door. But when you're in a locker room, that's the biggest problem. And then academics as well, that's another problem too, but I guess we'll just see what happens. We've already know what happens too. Leah Thomas can't compete in the Olympics anymore because she didn't transition at a young age. Those rules have changed. So they got some common sense finally. In a nutshell, this new Title IX, that thanks to Democrats, by the way, men can take academic and athletic scholarships from women. So women, you should stand up and be pissed off about that. Men will have full access to bathrooms, locker rooms, etc. And just like what he was mentioning with the college campuses, that's a mess. I understand we're in a more K through 12, so it's a little different. Men could be housed in dorm rooms with women. Okay, well, it's going to be lots of sex, let's be honest. Students and faculty must compel their speech. So a student cannot say what they would like to say to that student, or if they accidentally trip over a word and say something like a preferred pronoun, are they going to get sued? Is that student going to get expelled? Are we going to put a face mask on him? Maybe he spoke out too much. We're gonna send him home for a couple weeks.
All right, thanks, Harley. Marie, you're up.
Wow. My name is Marie Colbeck. I went to school here and my children all graduated from
Say your
here.
address, please.
I'm sorry, 661 Valley View Trail, Somerset, Wisconsin. And I don't envy any of you. This is not an easy time, not for any district. I do want to remind you of what we said when we said Pledge of Allegiance, liberty and justice for all. We aren't just talking about transgender kids. We're talking about all of the kids. There was a time when we used to say, we're a team, parents, community, teachers, school board, administration. I want us to be a team again. That means we have to respectfully listen to all views. And that means let's stop putting labels on people and drawing attention to what we divide on, and instead focus on what we can agree on. Unfortunately, I also grew up on a farm, and I wish I had that sense of humor. I digress. I don't think drawing attention to those that aren't certain what they are anymore is helping them in the way that you hope it does. We have yet to see the repercussions of the ideology that is being promoted. And I do mean promoted. If we were to go back to just interacting with respect by first names, taking away the labels that divide, I wonder if we wouldn't see a more productive and supportive environment for kids. And that's what we're here for. What's best for kids? It's going to be what's best for the community. It's going to be what's best for all of us. I know one of you had said that the lawsuits will come, but they can come both ways. They'll come from families that don't want to have to contend with this in their face. We all have gifts and talents, and I really appreciated when we had the opportunities for kids to shine. And I think if we put more attention on that, we could see some real change in where kids are putting their focus. But unfortunately, we become very distracted in what is not enhancing that. I have family, close and further out, who use medications. We are all aware of pharmaceuticals, not for transitioning, but for other ones, other challenges, other medical challenges, other mental challenges. They did not live all that long. When we take pills, when we take testosterone, when we take something that's foreign to our bodies, there will be
10 seconds.
consequences. I'm asking you today to please consider what is best for all kids, not just some. And to please, let's work together on finding that place where we can respect and build each other up.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank I'm sorry, Bruce, you missed my most important point, and that was stupid, the cost. There's a cost to this that's not addressed. The cost.
Sarah. Hi Sarah, this is Lacey Oster, Somerset School Board. You are live. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, for your public comment, if you could say your name, your address, and what you'll be speaking on, and then there is a 3-minute time that will start when you begin.
Excellent. Okay, I'm ready to go if you guys are.
Yep, we're ready.
Good evening, my name is Sarah Parshall-Perry. I am a senior legal fellow for the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. at 214 Massachusetts Avenue Northwest, Washington 20002. I am a lifelong resident of the state of Wisconsin, grew up in Waukesha County, and now have a vested interest in the Title IX rulemaking as I am former senior counsel to the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the Department of Education. This particular rule from the Biden administration has been enjoined by no fewer than 6 federal courts. The most recent is perhaps the biggest victory yet against the Biden administration. Among other things, the rule expands sex to include gender identity and expression in nearly every educational institution in the country. In short, Judge Broom from the District of Kansas ruled that the rule is not only contrary to law, but the Department of Education lacks congressional authority to make the rule. The rule violates the Constitution's spending clause. It violates the First Amendment because it is impermissibly vague and overbroad, and it violates the Administrative Procedure Act because it is considered arbitrary and capricious. At the end of the last Supreme Court term in West Virginia versus EPA, the Supreme Court said that the federal government was unable to and could not make rules that were not supported by direct congressional authority if they were questions of vast economic and political significance. That is precisely the situation in which we see ourselves now. The essential rewrite of Title IX has already seen 9 federal legal challenges, has been enjoined in 6 federal lawsuits, and is destined for review by the Supreme Court. In particular, and germane to this district specifically, the members who are in the Young America Foundation and Moms for Liberty all have students throughout the country in states except for 3. Wisconsin is among those states, and Judge Broom specifically said that it was required to enjoin the application of the rule in schools in every state in which Moms for Liberty and Young America Foundation had chapters. That includes the state of Wisconsin. There is a Moms for Liberty chapter in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin school students that are now subject to this particular and illegal policy, but who are also subject to the injunction itself. This is destined for Supreme Court review, and I'd like to clarify that even though we have heard from the administration that
Your time is up, Sarah.
All right, that's your 3 minutes. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks everybody who made a comment. So, moving on to item 3 on our agenda, discuss policies. We do have Trevor here, Trevor Helmers, our attorney, tonight. I thought maybe it'd be good to run through maybe some clarifications on Title IX and policy 2264, since that's what pretty much every public comment was about tonight. I figured we could start with him, if everyone is okay with that. Maybe if we have questions, make some clarifications on things that were said tonight, and maybe some other additional follow-up. Yeah. Is there a question there? Yeah. All right, cool.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, school board. So as Bruce mentioned, my name is Trevor Helmers. I know I've met most of you. So just to get a little background on my experience, I'm an attorney that represents almost exclusively school districts, also represents some other governmental entities, but almost 99% school districts, dozens of them across Wisconsin and Minnesota. And I've been doing nothing but that type of law for basically 16 years. I think I've been your district attorney for about 10. And so kind of to give you that background, I think the important thing for you to know is you're not alone. You're not in this, you're not the only district that this is happening in. Unfortunately, we kind of have this situation where these laws were put in place and they're effective everywhere. And you're a little bit limited, frankly, in what you can do here. One of the big issues that I wanted to address right off the bat is there was a lot of discussion about boys and girls participating in the same sports. I want to make it very clear that at this point, these revisions to the Title IX rules really don't talk about that. There is a carve-out that talks about the difference between the general rules applicable to Title IX that say non-discrimination, and then also its application to sports. And so I think that that's very important to say. What you don't have in front of you right now is a decision that you need to make on sports. So I'd say you would put that aside. That's not really what's before you. It's been a little bit interesting in looking through this and reading through the cases. There's been a lot of discussion about sports, and obviously that's in a lot of the news articles as well, but that's frankly not what's in there at this point. They have said over and over again, the federal government has said the sports regulations are coming. We're considering that in the future, and it's just not in there at this point. And then I think the other thing that would be...
That's not right.
Oh, go ahead.
That's...
And I'm definitely, that's the thing. I'm here for you guys. I represent you. I'm here to answer your questions. I'm here to, please ask me what you want to know. Go ahead.
It says in the ruling, extracurricular activities. That's sports.
Yep.
Sports is
Yeah.
57, said 57 times. Athletics, athletic directors, all over the 1,500 pages.
It's right here.
That is
Correct.
not, that's not what.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Title IX has lots of discussion about sports, but there is a carve-out for sports that talks about it right in there, saying, and they have said numerous times that this rule doesn't apply to sports. There is a, but go ahead, sorry.
I think that's a head fake. I'm sorry, I think that is just the federal government trying to just trick us, and that's not, we wouldn't
So,
stand for that.
okay, hold on a second here.
A lot of double
Just
talk.
please, okay, so what I'm gonna do here is, if you wanna remain in the meeting, then we can't have sidebar conversations. So if you wanna stay in the room and listen to what's going on, that's fine, but if you're not around this table, right now, you don't have a chance to speak, and if you do, I'll ask you to leave, and we'll pause the meeting until you do leave, okay? We're here to ask the questions, you had a public comment, everyone had their chance, had their time. So please, just listen to what we have to say, follow up with your emails and your responses, but that's how we need to proceed. Thanks.
And so just for purposes of the record, I want to be clear. 34 CFR 106.31A1 is the carve-out that talks about, and you can look that up later, that's the carve-out that talks about the difference between sports and other extracurricular activities. It is treated differently. I think the other thing that I want to point out as well is that the department commentary has repeatedly said that they don't cover athletics. And I get this argument. And this was made in a couple of the cases that have been referenced numerous times today. People are arguing this across the country, saying, well, this is about sports. And I think even the Kansas judge that issued the most recent ruling had to kind of say, well, yeah, it's not really about that at this point, and kind of set that aside and said, that's not one of the issues that I'm issuing an injunction for. The only argument I think for that is exactly what you're saying, that it's some kind of a head fake, that later they're going to issue some kind of other rules that say, well, no, actually it's about this, or actually it's about that. To me, that's a little bit, it's a little too attenuated to say that that's what's going to happen here. It relies on a bit of speculation because they have said over and over again, the rules are coming for sports. So I think that that's absolutely a valid concern, but at this point, that's not a part of what you're looking at in your potential changes. That wasn't a part of the most recent round of changes. So really, to me, what you're looking at tonight is not about sports. It's not about who's going to compete on what sports. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning about sports is you are a member of the Wisconsin, the WIAA, and they and DPI do have rules on non-discrimination that you can look at if you're interested in what are the current rules right now that are applicable to our teams about transgender students. They have issued policies. They have talked about what, when students can participate. And this brings me to the most important thing, I think, about this change to Title IX. This is a big change, obviously. It's getting pushback all over the country. One of the places where it isn't getting pushback is in Wisconsin or in the other 7th Circuit states. And the reason why is because this has been the law of the land here since 2017. Granting access to restrooms and bathrooms is the law of Wisconsin, has been since 2017. We have a very major case from the 7th Circuit from 2023 that talked specifically about this and said it does violate Title IX to discriminate against transgender students. So I think one of the things...
I just have a question.
Yeah, of course.
Isn't a judge interpreting law, or interpreting his interpretation of law and ruling on a case, how does that become law? Aren't our policies supposed to be on state statute? Where is it in state statute that girls and boys can go into bathrooms? Where in state statute?
Sure, and that would be kind of the difference between having a state statute and having law that is applicable to you. And we wouldn't have a state statute necessarily on a federal law. This was a federal court interpretation of a federal law saying that you cannot violate this. Not necessarily any argument about state statute. Our state statutes that talk about these types of things are really more the pupil non-discrimination type of laws. And they don't have that specific element there. So really what we're talking about is in this circuit and in Wisconsin, the law has been decided that essentially transgender students have rights and they can go into the restroom and locker rooms that they like. And that the risk of that, it's not necessarily put in state statute, but the risk of it is that the law is there, the decision is there, and when courts decide things, that becomes the law of the land. In the same way that we're arguing that, or there was some comment earlier that was talking about how this might get overturned. Might get overturned by the Supreme Court, and then at that point, it's not in a state statute saying we no longer have to follow this language from Title IX. So it's just kind of the difference between like statutory lawmaking and how laws in courts can essentially create law, because they're a co-equal branch of government. So I think that's why it's really an unfortunate situation because you didn't create this situation, and the law that's applicable to you is quite clear. And that's frankly why Wisconsin still could, the AG still could try to fight this regulation, but in all likelihood that wouldn't happen because we have this clear decision from the court from 2023 that says discriminating against transgender students violates Title IX. So the other thing to mention there is I think it's important to note as well that laws do change. That rulings do change laws. One of the reasons that the Kansas court, for instance, just ruled this way is because of overturning what's called the Chevron defense, which talked about how you give deference to the agency that makes the rules. That happened a month ago, and now it's being used by the court. So laws do change. You do have to keep up with them. And so the other thing that's important to note is when you put this policy in place, it's not forever. We changed this policy in 2020 when it just kind of got very, very changed, and there were all kinds of new requirements for what we had to do in investigations. So we changed this 4 years ago. We changed it 2 years ago when they updated it again and made some technical changes. So just because you adopt this policy, if that's what you choose to do, it's not the end of the story. If the law changes, if the Supreme Court overturns it and says this isn't constitutional, well then we're going to change our policy back. We're going to take that out of there. That's really that's kind of how policies that are based on law work, is things change. And so it's not, I think the kind of the overarching idea being that you aren't really making a decision to make a change in your local school district. This is how you are functioning now. If, for instance, last year we had gotten a Title IX complaint from a transgender student, we would have had to use our Title IX process because the 7th Circuit says that it is a violation of Title IX to discriminate against transgender students. Even though it wasn't in your policy, we would have had to do it. And the reason why is because if we don't, then we are subject to those kind of potential lawsuits and potential litigation saying you are violating my constitutional right to a free education by discriminating against me. So that's kind of the overarching piece that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk as well about a couple of other kind of questions that I know you guys have been raising, and you have. As I mentioned, it doesn't necessarily govern the rules about athletic teams, about who's going to participate in what sports. What happens if you don't comply with or approve the timelines by August 1? Essentially, it is important to point out that you're required to follow federal law, that as of right now, that is what it is. It says that you have to have these policies in place and that you have to, at bare minimum, start applying them in this manner as of August 1. Again, that could change. We could have, go ahead.
I have a question, sorry.
Yeah, of course, sorry.
So if
I will stop talking. I really want to listen.
If we already have in our policies gender identity by state discrimination, non-discrimination law, what's the rush?
Sure. Yeah, so what is the rush? And I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is literally what I was going to say, is that the federal government says so. They said it's August 1, and that you have to get this in place by August 1. If you don't, you are potentially in violation of federal law. And the potential violations of federal law, what could that mean? Well, it could mean a loss of state, or it could mean a loss of federal funding. But frankly, that just doesn't happen very often. I'm not sure, I'm not aware if it's ever happened, that someone's actually lost federal funding. Instead, what's much more likely is that you get thrown into a Department of Education or Office of Civil Rights complaint process and investigation. And I think that the investigation process takes years, is onerous, and at the end of the day, they're going to tell you that you didn't comply, that you didn't meet the deadlines. And so I think that there's an element there of kind of taking on, especially to your point, we already have policies on this. This is already the law of the land, so why take on that potential risk? And that's something you guys are going to have to wrestle with. It's already the law. It's already what we're doing. It's already what's in our policies. Why would we take on the potential risk? And the other thing as well is this is literally every district in the state. It's not just you. It's literally every district in the other states for right now. And so I think that that's important too, to know that you really aren't alone. You do risk those lawsuits and those federal fundings. The real change here, and I think that this is one of the interesting pieces too, is a lot of the changes were technical changes. A lot of them, frankly, you will like, because they take away some of those incredibly onerous investigation procedures that we had in 2020. Sorry, go ahead.
Are you talking about college investigations for sexual harassment?
I'm talking about the investigations that are required for K-12.
Oh,
yes.
Those are different than college.
They are literally not. They are the exact
not.
same. And that's one of the things that the 2020, the real changes were, they created these procedures and these due process requirements for an investigation that really are better suited for the college environment, and they applied them to K-12. And so you potentially have to go through these Title IX investigation process for sexual harassment with 2 kindergartners. And it just, I mean, I'm stepping past my legal advice and talking about experience doesn't make a lot of sense and has been very difficult for numerous districts to deal with.
What about teenagers?
What about teenagers?
Well, you know, if a case, if something happens at the college level between 2 18-year-olds, why can't it happen between 2 seniors here? This, am I on the right track there? I mean, as far as like age goes, right?
Sure,
So,
and so yeah, the Title IX applies to all ages. It applies to all K-12 and to college.
because this guts due process for the accused, right?
This-
Takes away hearings. If my 18-year-old son is accused of sexual harassment, I want him to have a fair process, and that is no longer the case under this. That is not good. We have due process in this country. All children need it. The accused and the victim. We have to have it.
Yes, and the changes to that process are very minimal. There are things like, for instance, instead of having to have 4 different roles, the person who is your Title IX coordinator can also be your investigator, which is going to be incredibly helpful because it is the type of thing where it really does, and especially in smaller districts, one of the problems that they have faced is they don't have 4 administrators to fill all the roles. And so that's one of the changes here. The due process rights are still there, unfortunately, for schools. One of the difficulties is some of those due process roles. And one of the changes, for instance, in 2020 were that you had to go through this entire proceeding, that you had to do the investigation. You had to give everybody all of the notes. You had to give everybody all of the statements. And so it's a very onerous process, and it kind of flies in the face of other federal laws like FERPA, but basically they said everybody gets to see everything. And so that did lead to like a decrease in students bringing forward some of these things because they were so afraid that, well, I'm gonna be investigated here. Those have not changed. It is some minor technical changes to those pieces. So the idea that it's been gutted and there's no more due process, that's just not accurate with what these changes are. And that's not what you're even looking at in your policy. Your policy changes are still there. And all of those elements would be in your, in the portion that you have for your grievance procedures. So you're required to have the non-discrimination and then the grievance procedures. That's why you have the 2 policies. And a lot of, those are all still gonna be there. That was not changed.
But administrators can choose which one, right?
Can choose which one?
Can they can choose which process now under, because it's been rolled back, that the onerous investigation and the workload, they no longer, under this law, have to do that. Is that right?
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
They still do. That's why I was editorializing a little on my own, saying these were onerous and it would have been nice to have them rolled back because I have heard horror story after horror story of the process. But no, those are all still there. That was not changed by this. The biggest changes here were the definition of sex to include gender identity. And then there's some additional pieces too that were pretty big changes but don't really impact anything that anyone has been talking about here today, which I've got written down and I can find them. The expansion of covered conduct by including sex discrimination. The definition of retaliation has been updated. That will be a big one. Preventing participation based on gender identity, again, that's that piece. And the definition of complaint has been loosened, so it no longer has to be a formal written complaint. Now it can be an oral complaint. That students with disabilities, this is another big change, that the Title IX coordinator has to consult with people on an IEP team or a 504 team if students with disabilities have been alleged to have engaged in sexual harassment. And then frankly, one of the other major ones that districts need to know about is that it has changed to responding to allegations of sexual discrimination or harassment, that you only had to, previously, before these rules were there, the law said that you couldn't be deliberately indifferent to known harassment or discrimination, which, if you think about it, made a lot of sense. If you know about it, you can't just ignore it. You have to do something. But they actually increased that and have said that it is now not just mere deliberate indifference, rather that in this administrative context, that you have to essentially fully effectuate Title IX, and they say that a recipient with knowledge of conduct that reasonably may constitute sex discrimination must respond promptly and effectively. So that's kind of raising the bar for how we have to respond to some of these complaints as well. That, in my mind, that's the biggest change for you, is now if you don't respond appropriately to claims of sexual harassment under Title IX, you are held to a much higher standard. Deliberate indifference to that you are prompt and effective. Because I think one of the difficulties when you get into these types of Title IX complaints is, what is an effective response? We can discipline students, but then what else can we do that would potentially be effective in that context? And frankly, that's something that if this is all rolled back, if this is all held to be unconstitutional rulemaking, that would go away as well. It would go back to the deliberate indifference standard. But we don't really know yet, because whenever they change rules like this, you kind of have to wait for courts to decide, well, what does that mean? But frankly, just reading it on its face, that's a much higher bar that you're going to have to meet in Title IX discrimination context. A couple of other things I did want to hit on, and then I want to stop talking and let you guys ask questions. What does the injunction do? And I know that there were a couple of comments. The most recent one, the Kansas one, was probably the most expansive. The really important thing that I want to point out is that it's extremely unlikely at this point before August 1 that we're going to get a nationwide injunction saying that this can't go into place on August 1. At this point, I think that it's probably unlikely. The Kansas one was probably the best chance for that. And I think that it's a little bit confusing the way that the Kansas court wrote this, because the question immediately that comes to my mind is whether they have the right or ability to kind of say that it's effective in every school where a member of this organization is. That's very unusual. That's not usually how a court would rule on that. The other important thing is they are requiring by July 15 to get a list of those districts, and then are likely going to issue a different ruling, or a ruling saying this now applies here, here, and here, which, I mean, frankly, violates the fundamental ideals of due process for Wisconsin to have like schools here when the case was down in Kansas and they didn't have any kind of response other than the fact that this was against the federal government. And what the rule was, is it said that the federal government cannot enforce the rule in any of those places. What it did not do is change underlying existing law in any of your states. And so it said specifically that this does not, that it does not roll back any of your state laws or federal laws, and it does not prevent you from creating your own policies. So, while a lot of people have kind of pointed to that case, it doesn't change the policy decision that you have to make here. And I think that's why it's also good to point out again that if you put this policy into place and then there is a nationwide injunction or something changes, you change the policy back. It's not the end of, it's kind of not the end of the question on that. And I think that there was a lot of discussion, I just want to mention this too, about this being unconstitutional. And I think that there are definitely arguments being made about that right now. But really front and center in all of the actual legal decisions has really been, did the Department of Education go past its lawful authority in creating a new rule? And so that's really more the legal issue that we're dealing with is this improper rulemaking? Yeah, go ahead.
But Chevron was overturned last week, and that's what this is going on about. This ruling was built on Chevron, Supreme Court overruled it.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's speculation, but do we think that, do we think that the law is going to be upheld by the Supreme Court? Who knows? They just overturned Chevron, which is a 40-year deference standard. So the federal government's gonna have to meet a higher threshold to prove the basis for this. The cases that we have right now are at the injunction stage, which is very different from where they might be in litigation 2-3 years from now, or if and when they ultimately get up to the United States Supreme Court. It's a very long process. And so, you know, frankly, what I've been doing, knowing that we were going to have this meeting tonight, has just been refreshing the federal government's page, the Department of Education's page, to see if they're going to say anything about it. You know, what are they going to say? Are they going to push it back? Are they going to say, like, let's go ahead and push it to next year? They haven't. You know, at this point, they're responding in the courts. It's pretty unclear what's going to happen with that. You know, and just because they're no longer entitled to the same level of Chevron deference, it doesn't mean that it's ultimately going to be held to be unconstitutional. And there, they can still say that it's unauthorized rulemaking, and frankly, that's probably the most likely. I'm speculating, but that's probably the most likely way that this case would get up to the Supreme Court is on the rulemaking piece, saying you can't put these rules in place because you didn't go through a proper process, rather than, you know, kind of a question of whether or not they're constitutional. That was a lot of me talking, and I apologize. I know there was a lot that I wanted to cover. What kind of questions do you guys have? What do you want to know?
All right, so you've made it very clear that at this point in time, it is federal law, and that we have Wisconsin state law that also supports it. And I know we have policies in place that already include gender identity. So if as a school board, we deliberately chose not to follow the law by not proceeding with the policy 2264. And then a student or a student's family brings a lawsuit against the district, would our insurance cover us when we deliberately made the choice not to follow the law?
A couple of things. As your attorney, I have an ethical obligation to you as a client. I cannot advise you to violate the law. I can't do that ethically. I could lose my license to do that. Ultimately, it is your decision as a board, not my decision. I give you advice, you decide what to do. Knowing that this is a recorded public meeting that your insurance company may look at in the future, I would say there is no way that they should deny that claim. Is there an argument that they might make in that scenario to say that this is an exclusion from coverage? Possibly. And they might refuse coverage in that scenario. Should they? No. Might they? Possibly.
Thank you.
Can you just talk a little bit more about, so let's go back to the bathroom situation. Lots of conversation about bathrooms, locker rooms. You said there's Wisconsin law already in place that we have to allow it. And we don't have that. We've never discussed that. Are we in any type of violation because of that? And then if we update the policy to what has been put in front of us, do we then have to provide some type of bathroom or locker room situation for co-ed? Or can we still remain operationally as we are?
Yeah, and I think a couple of things, just again to clarify, we don't have Wisconsin law on it. We have law from the 7th Circuit and from judges in Wisconsin. We have both. We have state courts and federal courts that have both said you have to do this. That's been the state of the law since at least 2017, and not, if not before. I think operationally you're going to be in the exact same situation. I don't think there's going to be any change to your operation. I don't think there's going to be any changes to your policy. You know, one of the questions I get asked quite frequently is, well, what are we going to do about the students who don't want transgender students in their bathrooms, right? That's the big question. Comes up all the time. That's actually been litigated. There have been cases on that before. And essentially, you know, what courts have said to us over and over again is, you can't force the transgender students to go into their biological bathroom or force them to be in a single stall bathroom. Quite often we offer that as an accommodation, and most kids take it because they don't want to be in the other bathroom. So if that is what the student wants, great. We work with the student, we work with the family, and we figure that out. If not, and there is a potential complaint on the other side saying, I know that there is a transgender student in the bathroom, I don't want to be in there. Well, we can offer that other student the opportunity to either go to that bathroom, or they can also go to a bathroom that's a single stall that would give them more privacy. And frankly, I think that my advice since 2017 has really been, you work with the family to figure out what is the accommodation here? What does this student want? What does this family want? What do they need? So operationally, I think that you're going to be in the exact same scenario.
Okay.
Not going to be much change.
Okay, and I read something in the update about how it applies to sports. You talked a little bit about sports, and it expressly states those changes are probably coming, right? So we know it's coming down the road. But it also, there was a reference in there about if you have a boys team and a girls team at this time, we don't have to allow a transgender student to be on the other, correct? We can still say no. Is that?
Yes. Essentially, I think that you would have to look to the WIAA rules, which do have some limitations. WIAA and state DPI have essentially said you can't discriminate, but here are some of the eligibility rules. So the easy one is always, females can always be on the males team. They can always be on the males team. Biological females can always be on the boys team. The bigger question, and that's transgender, that's non-transgender, that's just the rule of essentially Title IX. The bigger question is transgender females, biological males, participating on the girls team. And I think that there are rules already outlined in WIAA that I think require a certain waiting period, a certain amount of treatment. I apologize, I'm not 100% familiar with that. I have the citations to it. I just haven't really dealt with one personally before.
But if we adopted this and on August 1st, this went into effect, we don't need to change those rules for sports.
No, we still follow the WIAA rules.
Okay. I think just one more then. There was a school board out in, I think in Washington State. It was on the national news. They released a resolution essentially saying, we stand against these. Are you familiar with that at all? And can you talk a little bit, like what does that do to the public to say, hey, listen, operationally we stand, to support everyone that comes through the doors, and meet them with whatever they need, but we're not changing our operation just because this policy came in. We're going to adopt it. It's there, but we're not changing policy. Can we make that statement publicly?
Yeah, and I think one of the real difficulties is weeding through kind of real stories and not real stories. I've been able to find at least 3 where I was able to go to the school board's websites and find what they'd actually done, 3 across the country. A couple of them from April, where they essentially said we aren't going to make these changes. But I think that those were in states where ultimately they've now been put in this, so it's kind of like an easy thing for them to do. I am not aware of the Washington one. I think in general, if you wanted to issue statements and say we're not going to change our operations here, you would be absolutely accurate that we aren't going to change our operations, that this is just a law, we're following it, we're putting it in our policy, might change later, but at this point in time, it doesn't change what we do. It doesn't change how we, how we interact with our students, how we interact with our families. Sorry, I will get to you. I just wanted to also say, unless and until we get a new court case that says that 2023, the 3 or 4 from Wisconsin, that those were all wrongly decided, that we're changing the law on this. Again, in which case, we follow the law, and then we change it at that point. Sorry. Yes.
Not impacted operationally, as you say, but what about freedom of speech and compelled speech?
Yeah, so compelled speech has been an argument made in numerous cases, kind of like, that's almost like a new one. It was in the Barnett, or maybe not Barnett, but the West Virginia decision on the Pledge of Allegiance in the 50s, and then wasn't brought up again until just recently. And students are starting to make this kind of compelled speech argument now. It's not really favored. Hasn't really gotten up to the level of a lot of cases on it. The cases that I've seen on it have basically said, no, this isn't compelled speech, you don't have to say this, you don't have to say that. We did get some of that in some of the, obviously I've been monitoring this very closely over the last couple of years. There have been a couple state courts that aren't applicable here that have really talked about that, but no federal courts or Wisconsin courts have really talked about that idea. From a compelled speech argument, the best argument for a compelled speech claim would be, I was in a speech class at school, and I gave a speech about the biological sexes, one male, one female, and I got a Title IX complaint against me. That would be the best type of argument for that scenario, to give you a hypothetical. But the issue about Title IX is that it's not just that a statement has been made. You have to meet the other elements of Title IX as well, which would be the interference with an educational environment. So it wouldn't necessarily be a Title IX violation to simply say, for instance, in a school speech class, there are 2 genders, male and female. There would have to be, in my mind, more of like a type of targeting towards a particular student, or some sort of clear interference with the educational environment. Of course, we're talking about hypotheticals here. Hypotheticals are kind of difficult to say for sure how they're going to turn out. But that would have to be the type of argument that you would get. The Kansas case mentioned that one, mentioned the idea of religious freedom, mentioned the idea of, there was the third one. There were basically 3 First Amendment-ish arguments that were made. And it said, yeah, that's a possibility, yeah, that's a possibility, yeah, that's a possibility. Didn't really give a lot of analysis to the First Amendment piece. But that would be something as well that in the investigation process, that would potentially be fleshed out. Because the student would have the opportunity to respond and would get the complaints, would get the claims, and would have the opportunity to respond. Would have the opportunity to appeal it.
Well, the state of Tennessee, in their ruling, that was a 25-page out of 90 just on freedom of speech concerns. So that concerns me.
Agreed. Yep. And I think that there is no underselling the fact that this is a hot button issue. I don't know how often you have this many people in your meetings. I think that we are probably, we're probably going to be, not necessarily here, but somewhere is going to be facing a lawsuit either way, as we have for the last 10 years on transgender issues all across the country. There have been dozens and dozens and dozens of lawsuits on transgender issues. I don't think that's going away.
You said it's interesting that the injunction from Kansas, where legally does that stand if the 10th Circuit federal judge would impose an injunction in the 7th Circuit?
Yeah, it's not clear, frankly. Unfortunately, with judges, a lot of times they do things, and then everyone has to kind of figure out, well, what are we going to do with this? Like, how do we respond to this? In all likelihood, that will be appealed. And then they will probably get into more on that kind of idea. It's kind of there's been a lot of discussion, I'm going to get too nerdy here, but there's been a lot of discussion in the last 10 years about nationwide injunctions, because we've seen them more and more and more. And what are we going to do about nationwide injunctions where, this particular judge down here, and it's a West District of Texas, has issued nationwide injunction, nationwide injunction, nationwide injunction. And a lot of them have been overturned, and a lot of them haven't. A lot of them ultimately went up to the Supreme Court and they agreed. There it's more clear. When the Supreme Court says this is nationwide, that's clear. It's a little hard to tell. I think that the important things from that ruling for you to know are the two that I mentioned earlier, that it says, number one, this doesn't apply, this doesn't change any state laws or any other state or federal laws. And then number two, it only applies to the federal government. And it says federal government, you can't go after these districts in these 4 states for not complying with this policy. So, in my mind,
Does it exist until it's appealed or not?
Well, yes, it exists right now. It exists right now, and the federal government's appealing in multiple states. They issued, I think they issued their arguments in the Tennessee one maybe today, and I read that brief quickly. I can't remember if it was Tennessee or not, to see what their kind of position was on, is the injunction only on the word sex or is it on everything? And it seems like the federal government is taking the position that the injunction's on everything, which unfortunately means some of those better things that we liked, from some of these changes to make things easier for smaller districts are potentially not there either. But quite honestly, in the last 5 days, things have changed 2 or 3 times. So it is fast moving. I don't think there's any way, again, I'm speculating. I don't think there's any way this doesn't end up at the Supreme Court in one fashion or another. That's probably in the next year, 2 years. Yeah.
So I think piggybacking off of what you just said, I think in a lot of people, it's like, why so fast? August 1st, we're putting this and we're rushing into this. Just to get, even sitting here tonight, it's giving me a lot more information from the webinars I've watched and different things. So, can we delay? Can we drag our feet? Because I feel like you're saying there's so much things that are going to, and kind of, how Lori had asked, I feel like instead of rushing this, what happens if we don't say, we're not gonna pass it, we are gonna pass it, we say, we are waiting until we have more information? Are we at risk at that point? Because I think there's just, hearing you from law, this sounds like, there's a lot of what ifs going on. There's a lot of things that, a lot of concerns, a lot of, missing points, a lot of, with the case for the Moms for Liberty, it's like, okay, well, this was ruled here, but this wasn't here.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying, Trevor, and I think for everybody listening, I'm like, this isn't, I think what started and what it sounded like, oh, the board's trying to do this. It's like, this is not, this is not coming from us. This is coming from, but what can we do? I want to piggyback off what Reed said, like, how can we work together? How can we do things to be, when people are, well, don't take federal funding. Well, obviously, we're a public school. We're going to go bankrupt if we lose that. But then I'm also hearing, hey, the chances of that happening are really slim to none.
I think,
and I don't want to put you in a bad.
That's exactly what you've done.
Maybe
here's what I would say.
I will rewind more or less to particularly my question about delaying.
Yeah. So here's what I would say. This exact same thing happened in 2020. 100%. We were given no time to put in place by August 1. I mean, the way different changes than this. It was create new policies out of whole cloth. These are just minor revisions to the policies. It was get these people trained by August 1. Get this into place. That was a Herculean effort for people. A lot of districts didn't make that August 1 deadline. Some districts didn't hear about it and put it in place a year later. And it was just kind of a knock on wood, they didn't get caught. I have not heard of a single district that lost funding for being late by August 1 in 2020. That being said, this is what the law says. It says that you have to do it by August 1. I think that there are numerous issues of not just number one, you have to follow the law, but number two, what would happen if we get that complaint on August 1 from a student who says they're transgender and says, I'm being harassed based on my transgender status? Well, frankly, because of the existing case law that's applicable to us, they're going to get those rights. We're going to do that. So in my mind, the question this board has to wrestle with is the risk worth it when we're going to be doing that anyway? And that is your call. You guys have to make that decision. Is there a potential for a loss of federal funding? Yes. Is there a potential for an OCR complaint or an EEOC complaint? Yes, absolutely. It's about as good as I can do.
So in my mind, there's a difference between a school district making a mistake and making a deliberate choice.
I think you're absolutely right.
And in 2020, creating policies from nothing is a lot different than the policy we're looking at is basically looking at the protocols that will be followed if a complaint is filed. It's really not that different from what we already have, and the differences are to the district's advantage as far as going through the process. It makes it much less difficult to go through the process.
And also easier for complainants. There are things that are easier for complainants to come forward.
Right.
I've been in a Title IX fight where they said there was no formal signed complaint. Where's the signature on the complaint? And the district was kind of in the spot of, well, are we being deliberately indifferent by not doing this just because someone didn't sign it, or do we have to dismiss it? So clarified some things, yeah, and I think that you use Neola for your policies.
Mm-hmm.
The changes from Neola were not that big to this policy. They weren't that big, there weren't that many. I have put everyone to sleep. Got it. Yeah, sorry.
So, I mean, again, we've said it in many different ways. No matter how we handle 2264, it doesn't change anything with the bathrooms. No matter how we handle 2264, it doesn't change anything with sports that's currently in place, correct?
Correct.
So all of the information, all the conversations, and all the public comment, that's not part of what we as a board are doing or approving, correct?
It's really not. No.
Okay.
No, I think that what I would say is it's probably more applicable to the areas where these laws aren't already in place. Like those kinds of comments about the federal law and about the federal government and those kinds of challenges, which is why I don't think we're going to see one in Wisconsin.
Because we already have the
Correct.
7th circuit court or whatever, so that's already applicable. So that's I want to be clear on that with everybody. As we look at this policy, I agree. I'm pissed, I'm upset that the government is going to throw this in our face and have us approve this and strong arm us into something. I mean, none of us like this situation. You know, so I don't like that either, but looking at it and the reason to bring Trevor in is to kind of explain what we're doing here and what these changes are and what is in the best interest of the district to do, and that's.
What if just one school district said, I think we should wait, because I know of 3. I will not go on public record and say them, but I know of them, I can speak of that off the record somewhere else, but they exist. And I think that it just takes one, and I think the federal government can wait.
Kids.
So if we, have you compared this to 2266 that we currently have in place? 2264 and 2266?
Not side by side.
Because if you read, I think the first line of 2266, it has gender identity and sexual orientation right in.
I'm aware of that.
So that's already.
But I have other
in our
concerns
district.
as well. Freedom of speech, due process, there's other things here too.
And hope Trevor kind of clarified some of the due process.
Or do you have another question?
No, I just disagree.
You disagree?
Can you just speak to the due process again, compared to what we have, what's currently in policy and what's in this new policy? The difference?
Not really. The procedures are almost exactly the same. The changes are not that much. The changes are just some of the other elements that I spoke to.
Okay.
Those are really where the major changes are. Otherwise, it's exactly the same.
Trevor, you were, I think, about to speak about a case that you had maybe encountered with the kindergartner, and I think you were interrupted. Could you, and I get what I think your point being made, or where it was going was with how you would handle a kindergarten student or an elementary, but this is different than an 18-year-old or a high school or a college student. Can you just speak to that?
Yes, and this would be going back to the 2020 revisions. And unfortunately, you treat kindergartners the same way you treat college seniors. There is no difference based on age. If a kindergartner on the bus says, this kid is sexually harassing me, it is the same full-blown process that you have to go through for a kindergartner as opposed to a college senior. So I've been saying since 2020 that these regulations do not make sense for the K-12 context. That's not changed. That's the same.
That's state.
That's the same.
But
We thought that a lot of that was coming. A lot of potential rules were put out. But at the end of the day, it's the same. There's nothing different.
But doesn't the new policy 2264 give our coordinator much more flexibility to handle things a little bit differently for a kindergartner versus a high schooler?
I think in general, in some of the processes, potentially, a couple of the changes were expanding, some things about, there was only one very narrow way to try to approach both families and say, would you like to go to an informal resolution session on this? Some of those have been expanded. So yes, for sure. That's why the kind of the difficulty with this is some of these will make things easier and will protect a lot of the students better. Some of them, and then a lot of them didn't change.
But just to clarify, you no longer need just a written complaint like we had before, and maybe Abby can speak to this. But, and it had to be objective. Now it can be oral and subjective under this. That's a big change.
I would say it could always be subjective because it's one person's opinion about it. They're saying I'm subject to harassment, to discrimination. So now it does not have to be a formal signed complaint either by the parent or student or by the coordinator have the ability to file it themselves and sign on behalf. It still has to be a formal complaint, but it doesn't have to have that kind of sign. That's really the formal signed complaint is one of the changes that was brought forward.
Okay, so as a board, we have all these policies on here. 2264, obviously one of them. We're gonna go on through things. It's been 2 hours of this meeting. I mean, I guess if we have more questions for Trevor, I want us to ask him, but also, I sent out an email to everybody yesterday, just thinking about, probably need to meet next week to just not only look at this policy, and if we're gonna proceed with this policy, but also the rest of them on our agenda, because the other items on here, I think we should table until these policies until next week to go through them all, go through the rest of the items on the agenda tonight, but then set a specific meeting to go through all the policies. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Just hold off on going through any of them tonight. It's a separate meeting of just policy review. And then we can go through these other policies, and then we can get down to 2264 and say, in a week, we're gonna learn more. We all know this. And you know what, again, we might have to need the week of the 28th, which I probably don't wanna do either, but if things are changing this much, to your point, Lacey, do we have to rush into this or not? I don't wanna not follow the law and put us into a potential litigation or lawsuit from somebody, and I don't wanna ram through things, but if nothing's changed by then, I don't know.
Even if somebody made a lawsuit during this time, considering everything that's going on, doesn't that have to be taken into account?
I think that would 100% be our defense, is that, and again, so my role is to protect you and to defend you. That would be our argument, is we were waiting to see what was happening. It was so unclear. The real problem with that is the law here is very clear. The law that's applicable to us right now is pretty clear.
On gender identity,
Yes.
but there's other things too, under this.
Yeah, I kind of see that as the biggest issue. Biggest change.
We're already following current law, right?
Correct.
It's clear as mud. So an injunction exists. There's no appeal here. So that falls on us, right? Yet we would still be following existing law without implementing this change.
Without implementing this change? I would say no. You would not be following the law of the state, the Wisconsin courts that have ruled on this, and the Seventh Circuit courts that have ruled on this, that are directly applicable to you, as opposed to a district court in a different jurisdiction.
We're already following those laws.
You are, yes.
Our
Sorry, maybe I
policy
misunderstood.
satisfies that.
The changes to the policy, yes, and your policy already has a lot of this language in it.
So the
Because
added
of,
language
is not that much different.
But that old policy ends effective the 31st of July. So you would
The
have
way
to
it's
file a
written, you would have
complaint
to.
from 31st of July 2024 and previous, if that's when it happened. But anything that occurs after August 1st, 2024 falls under policy 2264.
That's under these changes though. If you didn't make the change yet, that wouldn't exist. We would be following 2266.
I don't think so. I think you wouldn't roll and follow it, operate under 2266, because it's when the offense occurs.
You have to, it's the one that's in place.
That change hasn't occurred yet, is what I'm saying. That's in this, it's in these updates. Without it, the existing 2266 doesn't say August 1st.
You're saying if we didn't adopt the new policy, the old one just stays in place? Even on August 5th, that's what is applied with a complaint, right? Dr. Askin? That policy doesn't just expire,
Right.
No.
Unless we change it to what it says now.
Right.
So I think what you're asking, Ian, is if we simply keep policy 2266, and don't follow through with the current federal law of enacting policy 2264, that would be okay. Is that what you're asking?
Basically, yes. Yes.
So Trevor, is that true?
I am looking through this 100-page packet of policies. I can't tell which one is your current one and which one is. I want to look at that again to say exactly what is your definition in your current policy. If you happen to have it pulled up. No, I never mind.
I have
But
it right here.
Is this something you can just share with us? Like, emails or something?
I just want to see what your definition is in the current one.
You see it?
If you put up on screen. Tell me, no. Jesus Christ.
I mean, this is why I was saying that these changes aren't very much. They aren't very big. You have a lot of very similar language to what the change to Title IX is. So there would be an argument that you would have, that you would say, again, an argument, that you would say, our policy is compliant, at least as far as the definition of sex, with the new federal laws, because you already do this. You aren't making a change to that. You're probably just going to put it in a definition section instead. On just that point. Some of the other points you would be out of compliance with. But on the definition of sex, that's why I started, and I would end again with the idea of you're not really making a change. This is a very minor change that you're making. You're probably going to put the same definition in another section. And so, I mean, there are some arguments that at least with pieces of it, you would still be in compliance on August 1.
I'm not talking about federal law. This is where it gets confusing.
Yeah.
Are we violating an injunction by adopting 2264?
No, and you wouldn't be at any injunctions that are currently in place, no. Because it specifically, the Kansas one specifically said that this does not change any existing state or federal laws, and it only apply and does not change your ability to put a policy in place. So there's no injunction that's preventing you from putting a policy in place. What it says is in those 4 states, and then however we're going to figure out whoever these people are in the 2 organizations that are named, that the federal government can't enforce it against you there. But that's not here yet.
Could be.
Could be. Yeah, we could. You could have your AG might file an injunction tomorrow. I don't think it's going to happen because
I mean, the people from those groups have to exist in this district.
Yeah, and
Does
I think
that apply?
that the issue really is, again, that kind of regardless of whether whether those groups are here, which I think they probably are, but regardless of whether those groups are here, that court decision does not change state or federal law that are applicable to schools in whatever jurisdiction they're in, or your ability to implement policy. So we would not be in any violation of that order by implementing policy or making those minor revisions to the policy. Even if those people were here, we might get some breathing room, because in that situation, the federal government can't come in and say, you're in violation as of August 1.
That's specifically what I was asking.
Oh, yes. I'm glad that I finally answered it in the most roundabout way possible.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify, 2266 on the agenda here is our current policy.
Yes.
2264 is the new policy that would replace it.
No, not replace. 20, that's why it has a different number. 2266 will stay in place. 2264 will also be in place because even if a complaint is
That's right.
filed, you.
Because of the timeline.
Yes,
So the old policy stays because if someone has a complaint from a year ago,
yes.
66 or
Yeah.
64 is what you used. Okay.
No, if they file a complaint August 15th, 2024, about an incident that occurred in July of 2024, policy 2266 applies.
Got it. So if somebody wanted to look, so on the website would be all of our policies,
Mhm.
66 and 64. The language is there.
Well,
I heard somebody in the audience,
2264 is not on our district website currently.
not on the website.
But it is on our agenda.
Okay. I heard somebody ask about putting it up there. So if you wanted to see that, compare, that's how you'd find it.
Yeah.
Agenda, website,
The policy, if you clicked on that link,
it'll take you right to it. It's all
review
public.
policies, it's on there.
But currently, 2264, as it appears on our agenda, the policy committee only got to the third item.
Right. So people will see a bunch of extra stuff. It's
And
not
it'll be
cleaned up.
clean.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so how does everyone feel about tabling our policy review until some night next week? Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay, what night next week does everybody want to meet to go through this?
Why not Monday?
I'm free Monday. Is everyone else free on Monday?
I'll make a motion that we table agenda item 3 until a special session to be held on Monday, July 15th. At what time?
6 o'clock work for everybody?
6 o'clock?
Sure.
All right, so that is my well, I'm not done with my motion, because as part of my motion, I would also like to make as part of my motion that we will not have public comment on that night.
Anybody second your motion? I would second that, I will second that motion. On the interest of time, we've heard a lot of public comment tonight. We've seen a ton of emails. We've talked with our attorney. I am fine with not having public comment. It's an option. We don't have to have it at every meeting. We've heard a ton of public comment already. I'm fine with not having more of it the next meeting night, so that we can take our time and spend it wisely, not spend an hour listening to public comment. And I know, I'm not happy to have people, or I'm happy that people came, but, you know, this is a lot of time for us, and it's gonna be, this will be another 3-hour meeting to go through these policies. So,
The only thing I'd add to that is, I guess I'm just kind of in favor because that'll be considered the first reading.
Yes.
So we will have these on the agenda on
Well,
the 20,
I think it'll be a second reading, but we'll have a third reading on.
they will be on the
22nd.
agenda on the 22nd, and there will be public comment at that meeting.
Yes.
Nothing will be adopted on
So it won't
next
be
month.
approved or?
No,
It's just us working through it.
us working through updates.
Open to the public, listen to the conversation.
Yep.
Okay.
Are you able to motion?
Yeah, yeah, you can make a second.
Any other thoughts?
I only got a couple emails. So.
We can break it 15.
Right on the board up there. It's right here. Right here.
1, 2.
Three.
I got a lot of emails.
4.
I would just want to make sure that even.
So use 'em.
Add,
By all means.
I
Yeah,
think
let's go
we're
with
sure
it.
to
I
know
would
that
like
we
to-
cannot, that it's discussion, nothing's approved or denied at that next meeting. Because we just.
Yeah, they'll just be noted the same as they are now, just reviewing the policies, open.
Because with Title IX and this aside, there's a lot of other discussion that needs to go with all of those policies.
Yeah. I wouldn't be looking at it.
Plus, you're not limited to 3 minutes in an email.
Yeah, I know that's not a favorable opinion, and I'm sure people are gonna be upset with me, so whatever, I'm right here, no problem, but we've all spent a ton of time looking through this stuff and researching, and so we have a policy, or we have a motion, we have a second. We'll do a roll call vote. Dan, I'll start with you.
That the public comment is not included?
That's part of the motion right now, yes.
I'm up first?
Yeah. Yes.
No.
Yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Lacey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. So, the motion passes 5-1. All right, so with that, thank you, Trevor, for coming in
Thank you so
tonight.
much.
We'll have a meeting next week on Monday at 6 o'clock. Everybody is welcome to come again, view that meeting. We'll just be discussing policies. All right, let's move on to item 4 on the agenda. Brandon Perry. Live sit here.
Yes.
Sit there as you go on the podium.
No.
I'm not speaking really, I'm just answering questions because you have questions. Or I didn't.
Alicia, are you able to pull it over?
No.
I'm also here.
Jan, do you have a quick overview on this one?
You want me to overview it?
Yeah, just
Okay.
50,000 foot.
Perfect. Basically, our library tech plan is a DPI required document. To the 30,000 foot view is, it's an overview of what we do in our libraries and kind of a general plan of where we want to go in the future over the next 5 years. It's basically gathering together all the documents and things we've done over the years and just putting it in one place so you can see it and see what we do. That's basically what you see there, includes the policies and things like that. It needs to be passed every 5 years, so this basically is what I put together. What'll happen is you'll approve it, and then we will go put it on, or give it to the DPI, and it'll live there until we do it again in 5 years.
During regular session.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, just a first reading. I think we talked about putting it on our website as well
Yeah.
after it's
Yep,
passed.
thank you.
So Brandon, I had a couple questions about the plan report. You talked about how.
Hold on, Lori.
Yeah.
Excuse me, guys, I can't hear a thing she's saying. Okay, sorry.
So in your report, you included the staffing that we currently have in each of the buildings. Are you able at this time to, you say that there's an aide with other duties. Are you able at this time, or could you, through email if you don't have that information?
So current.
Tell us what the FTE of that aide is. How much time exactly is that aide spending in the LMC versus doing the other duties?
Yeah, well, currently we have myself, so I'm in the LMC at the high school, along with my other duties. So basically that's not a full-time FTE in the library. In the middle school, we have an aide who's in the library. And Sarah can speak more to that, what her FTE is.
She also runs our breakfast line before school and then does lunch line, so for the middle part of the day. So kind of to make up that gap, this past year I did have a teacher who volunteered to take one of their foundations classes at that time so kids could still have access to the library. But she was split between doing lunch line duty, our point of sale, as well as uncovering the library.
That's the middle school, and then Alex, I think you're the only one, so you can talk to that.
Yep, so I work part-time at the middle school doing 5th grade media tech, and then I'm also, I guess, 0.75 at the elementary school doing the other library and media classes.
So then, is there time during the school day when the LMC is not available to students at any of our 3 buildings because of a lack of staff?
I think at the elementary we're fully covered throughout the whole day. I can't speak to the middle school when we're closed.
There were times when it was not accessible, so if like there wasn't a teacher available to cover them, the kids did not have access. But I also have teachers willing to walk their classes down to be able to have access. But do I have was there a person in there all year? No. All day, every day? No.
It's in that time in middle school where it was closed at times, was opposite the other half of the building at lunch. So like when 5, 6 was at lunch, the 7th or 8th grade teacher would cover to help make that work for those kids and vice versa, if they were available at the time to do it.
Right.
That's the time of day where potentially, if it was not available, that's where it wasn't available.
So when the example you gave, 5th and 6th graders are at lunch, in the past, that meant the 7th and 8th graders were in some kind of...
That's where a band choir falls, in a structured time where we're doing academic stuff with them, yeah.
And what we used to call study hall.
Some of that.
So that's the time when the 7th and 8th graders would have free time to go to the LMC.
But they also have their target time, and quite often our ELA teachers, once a week, will bring them down for, hey, we're gonna go read our books, just like we've done in every building for years, right? So it's not the only time by far,
Okay.
no, that they come down to do that.
Okay. And the reason I was asking these questions is because you also say later in the report that it would be beneficial to add at least 3 FTEs to the LMC program. So what kind of it's not clear in your report. Are you talking about certified staff? Are you talking about aides?
I think, especially for Alex, I know she would benefit from an aide in the elementary school. The high school would definitely benefit from an aide. And then getting back to where we have a certified staff in the middle school and an aide would be beneficial.
So your suggestion to add 3 FTEs would be 2 support staff and 1 certified staff?
Correct.
And then in your, the budget part of your report, you talked about common school funding and how we're very fortunate in Wisconsin that we're able to fund just about everything we need. And yet you were talking about a budget deficiency because of our staffing. So can you explain how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. Common school funds have some very specific things that we can spend money on. Basically, my overview of what that is if the kids can check it out or use it in the library, we can use common school funds on it. I mean, they go so far as what you can specifically. They used to be, you couldn't spend it on cameras. Now you can. So it goes to specific things where what we can use it on. Last year, you couldn't spend it on streaming video services. This year you can. So that they're very specific, and staffing is definitely not in there.
So you cannot use
No.
common school funds for staff?
No.
Any other questions for Brandon or Shannon on the library plan?
I just want to say this plan took a lot of time in terms of Brandon putting it together and working collaboratively with his team, so.
Alex.
There you go, yep.
Thanks.
So just want to shout them out because it's a big overtaking and a lot of conversations and some good analysis about what's happening in the libraries and some good discussion, so thank you both for that because I know it was a lot of work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yep.
All right, next item is the handbook updates. Pam, we're gonna start with you on the all school and elementary.
Okay. There isn't a lot of changes this year. If you look at the all school, first of all, Trent, Joe and I worked on, of course, changing the years. And then on page 3, there's no longer the high school was the high school students may have the opportunity to participate in Spartan Flex. That is struck, because that does not occur. We added the language about our Raptor program that all visitors must present a government-issued photo ID. We had added the language that they need to check in and get a badge, but they have to, with the Raptor system, have a photo ID. We changed the language in the 2 days, it was 3 days to 2 days of student absences will be unexcused to make it consistent across the 3 buildings. And then the next item, we struck the high school, middle school, only attendance at school events and absences. So again, that is consistent across the 3 buildings. To say that if a student doesn't come to school all day, they cannot go to an activity or event in the evening. And then page 17.
I'll talk here.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm like,
So this has to do with our device protection plan. There was a change in the cost of the Chromebook, so we reflected that in there. It went down, so that's a benefit to us. A date change, and then probably the bigger change is we have new language now regarding Google Workspace for Education, which appears in yellow at the bottom. Because Google Workspace for Education does some third-party apps as a part of its suite, we are going to have a list of that. You can see there's the bright blue there. We'll have a link to the new webpage for all of the third-party apps that Google may access that our kids might be using for school purposes. And we're going to keep it as a live link that parents, just like when you go through and do the food service agreement, when you do online enrollment or you acknowledge the handbook, you will also acknowledge the use of third-party apps. So because we use Google Classroom pretty widely and Google's used across, we want to just be transparent about that piece. And so the IT department right now is working on what all those apps will look like. If you've been on our webpage, you can see it's under construction. So when we have that new link and it's created, it will appear within the handbook, and then parents will have access to it that way as well. But it will become part of the online enrollment that they do each fall. So that was probably the
any questions or?
Yeah, I had a question about the elementary handbook.
Okay, should we click to that one?
Yes, because it had to do with, you're changing the 2 days to the 3 days. And so that, I think that was on page 3.
Yes.
All right, so you've got those open circle bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one still says 3 days.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Also then on the elementary one, we're gonna stagger, we started this last year, adding it to, our walkers will not leave till 3:05 for safety reasons, because they're meeting up with the middle school crossing guards, and there was this kind of gray time of, we want for student safety. So they gather in the gym, and so that's where that changes. Alex had some changes to, like they are checking out books now 2 weeks instead of 1 week. And then just the conference one was, again, to reflect this current calendar. Any question else on the elementary one?
I had just a quick question, and maybe,
Yeah.
I don't really know if it's referring to one of the changes, but with the thing added with all visitors must present a government, photo ID, I mean, I think that's becoming pretty standard. But as a parent checking in, I mean, it starts that by saying visits by parents are welcome and encouraged at Somerset schools. Is there more behind that? As far as a visitor, they can use their, I want to check in to take something to my, go do this or that. Is there more?
You would like to see more like explanation to what that might be?
I'm just more so curious.
So really
does
the
that
only,
really
like-
go with just volunteers, or is it like if a parent were, are
Well,
they
they are-
able to, I'm more or less, maybe this is just a separate
Yeah.
discussion, but are they able to, if they check in and use their ID and say, I'm visiting?
Yes.
Is that allowed?
So most parents that would do that are coming to have lunch with their children. Can they volunteer? Yes, of course, but usually then they have an arrangement made. They have to be on our volunteer list. But yes, parents can come in and get, or any volunteer comes in and gets their Raptor badge. But do they come and just kind of hang out in the classroom? No. Most parents come for lunch. I mean, that would be the number one, parents come for lunch. We have quite a few parents that come for lunch.
No,
Am
I'm
I
glad
answering
to
what you're
see
asking,
that.
Lacey? Does that?
Never mind, we're good.
Are you
No,
sure?
we're good, yeah, we're
Okay.
good. I'm
I wanted to be
happy
clear.
that is standard, I think.
Mhm.
I'm glad that that system's in place,
Yeah.
because I think it's a really easy and safe way to be like, here you go,
Mhm.
it's accounted for.
And just to speak with, it was kind of our first year really using
For
it last
sure,
year.
for sure.
And I mean, even if they were a vendor who came in and were meeting someone, like, we still ran their ID and they still wore the badge. And we did get some pushback from some folks who's like, well, I have this badge. Okay, well, thank you, we're glad, you're legit, but in the interest of keeping our kids safe, we're still gonna run your ID and then you will wear our sticker. And, you know, after the first time or two, then it was not a big deal, but they were some of those pieces just to ensure.
And we
the safety.
experienced that, especially in the spring with construction people coming in and.
No, I think as a staff member too, coming from a school that uses that, it's nice for people to see that.
Anything else on all district or elementary?
All right, middle school, most of them are fairly editorial. Change the year, updating my info to replace Sarah's. A couple time changes are in there. Our school day will officially start at 8 o'clock instead of 5. We're making a couple tweaks to how we do a couple things. And so our students are already in the building, and they're honestly ready to roll. So that's not a huge one that impacts our day. So those are there in page 2 and 3. Page 4 is just is updating and just defining a little bit more around our personal communication devices in our building, primarily cell phones. Just where they're used, how they're used, teacher permission in the classroom only. Honestly, with our one-to-one devices, we don't have a lot of that anymore. There's a few instances maybe where if they're creating a film, a little clip that they're tagging onto something, that's sometimes easier to do with your cell phone versus this. And that'd be it is an example of a special permission on there. Other than that, we have them in a locker. Instead of just out of sight, found that to be a more consistent way to go about that. Under the consequences pieces, that's just kind of explaining a little more what's happened in that first offense, because yeah, it can happen. Just a restorative intervention by the teacher and just contact home, just saying, hey, heads up, this is today, this is what we're working on. Second time around, building principal, behavior intervention coach, part of that, and again, contact home, and then nothing changed after that, what we do beyond that. The last one was just striking out purchase at lunch. There's nothing to purchase at lunch. It's all, they're punching their code or whatever, right? The only thing that we ever have where kids can purchase during school, we have some approved fundraisers that happen, and that's not terribly common. So it just, the cookie thing where it supports things for our guidance programs and stuff like that, some student council things that pop up, but there's nothing to purchase at lunch, so that's why I struck that out and just updated that a little bit, just to reflect what we've been doing. Questions?
Just a quick question about the start time, the 8 from 8:05. You gonna change the time the doors open? Because it was currently 7:45?
It's currently 7:45. I think we're still good with that. You know, we've done a little leeway in the wintertime when it gets really cold and kids are out there, like we've opened and we've found a way to supervise in the commons or stuff like that. But I don't see a real need to bump that another 5. I think we keep where it is because staff's arriving there, and honestly, our buses arrive and that's when they come in too. Kids get off the buses at 45. I think keeping that consistent where it is a good spot.
Okay, that was my next question, was buses.
Yep.
I know it's only 5 minutes, but sometimes there's buses there at 8 o'clock.
Well,
So bus companies aware, they'll just route, I'm guessing
Yeah,
a
so
little bit.
when they're running late, they're really good at Safeway, reaching out saying, hey, something happened this route, or, yeah. Last year we didn't have a lot of it because we didn't have a lot of snow. But, this route, something happened, they're gonna be running a little late. They contact us, we communicate to staff, and adjustments are made to make that work.
End time staying the same? End of day?
End time is exactly the same.
Yeah, high school, so title page and page one, mostly editorial, people changes, year changes, pretty straightforward. Didn't change a whole lot with our handbook, really page 4, when it pertains to academic honesty, we struck the word call and changed that to contact, just in the day of email, or we wanted that to be a little more broad, so if a teacher ran into a parent at a game or somewhere and they had a face-to-face conversation, in my opinion, I feel like that would suffice for contacting the parent in that type of a situation when there's a cheating or a plagiarism incident. In regards to academic recognition, so this applies for when we're calculating our Laude recognition with seniors upon graduation. Really, we've been using unweighted GPA, but we really wanted to make sure that that was emphasized in here, just so people are really clear on what specific GPA is used, if it's the unweighted or it's the weighted. So we use the unweighted GPA to calculate those. And then for the Laude scores, when it comes to cum laude and negative cum laude, we added the 79.99, 40.00, 99.99, 80.00. We have not run into that where a kid has been at those, but we really wanted to be clear in case we got to a question if the kid was at a 79.5, well, where does that push them in the Laude system? And then with page 6, with disciplinary action, options and consequences, added the bullet point for if we have kind of another tool in our tool belt is a referral to our athletic activities director for a code of conduct warning or violation if there's repeated behavior in school. That does align with our code, but we wanted to make sure it outlined here in our student handbook. And then on page 10, high school graduation requirements, consumer education, that course name was changed with the course handbook last fall, I believe, for this current school year, to be renamed to personal finance. So I wanted to make sure that was updated to be the correct course name. And then we struck out the community service hours being reduced due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Every class now, every grade that's in the high school now has been a full normal high school experience, where the class of 2024 they were freshmen when the pandemic hit, so there was still some accommodations for that.
The Laude scores, was it last year or the year before we had a conversation about, there was a change and where kids were, are we caught up and that's not an issue anymore?
I believe we are caught up with that.
Those have graduated out?
I think you're talking about the honors classes, or not?
Well, there was, a student came in, yeah, because there was a change, so they're.
Yep, yeah.
That's
We
not
were
a thing
caught up,
anymore.
yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for Trent or any other? All right, thank you for coming in, thank you for putting these together. The dates we'll bring back for approval at the 22nd.
Troy is going to go through this as well.
Troy, yep. There you go. Go ahead. Good.
I'm going to stand up because I've sat long enough. So what I have tonight is the Coach Advisor Handbook. Go through that first. There's very minimal changes to that, if any. Just one example is on page 5. We talked about how captains need to be included in their selection, in their handbook that the coaches put out, or advisors put out. Otherwise, the rest of that language is remaining the same. And then at the back on page 21, that is not new highlighted and crossed out stuff. That was actually included last year. But the hope is that that's temporary, and then some of the things that are X'd out will come back once we get on maybe a little stronger budget for us. So we're leaving that in place right now that cover the cost of equipment to a member of the district, paid coaches, advisors to attend one clinic or state tournament per year. So as of right now, that's remaining in place, but so again, that's not new necessarily. You would have saw that last year if you're on the board. But I left that there to see that our goal is to bring that back, once we kind of get in a better spot with that. So again, those are the only two things to highlight on the coach's handbook, advisory handbook changes. Any questions on anything else in that handbook? Great. Moving on to the co-curricular code. Again, you'll see highlighted changes in there. On page 3, section 5, attendance and requirements, we made 2 additions to that. First part's requiring a note for their appointment. Prior, that wasn't a thing. You had until 10 o'clock. But if you came in after 10 o'clock, you could say you had an appointment. If you had an appointment, then it was excused, but now we're requiring a note for that appointment. And that does put us in alignment with our student handbook. And it also helps clear up any confusion over if they're just missing school or actually on an appointment. The second highlight allows us to enforce consequences upon students that are habitually late to school or to classes even. Again, it gives us the ability to better enforce and kind of have some teeth in it, as opposed to they're show up at 8:10 every day, unexcused. Kind of coincides with the truancy piece, but this is just kind of putting some wording to it. Other than that, nothing else was changed or added in the code other than the semester dates and when those all end and all the things that go with that. So, any questions on either of those handbooks as we move forward?
Shannon, do we have to do anything if we proceed with the Fund 80 at middle school athletics for this? Does that change anything?
No, not right now. No.
Good?
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, now, move on to the next item, academic standards. Sarah.
Yep, so per policy, each year the school board needs to show clearly what the standards are that we will be addressing this year for our students in each and every subject area. In my memo, I do have the correct link. The old one was broken when we switched over to the new website, so the link that's in there, it lists all the academic standards. Alicia, do you mind going to my memo and then just popping it up there real quick?
Yep.
So if you click on that first link there, that's on our new page. It lists under construction. But if you scroll down, you can see all of the areas and the standards that are attached to them. There are Wisconsin standards, and then like our arts department uses the National Core Arts Standards. So you have direct links to all of those. If you want more information about the other standards, Alicia, if you go back to my link, I'll just talk with those. You don't have to click them. The second link there just talks about the Wisconsin academic standards through the Department of Public Instruction. And then new this year, we had to work with WIDA, and so if I screw something up, Abby, you let me know, because this has been something you've been working on. For our English language learners, their English standards needed to be, what's the word?
Approved, and then will be embedded.
And they'll be embedded into our ELA standards, K-12. It's not anything earth-shattering or crazy. It's really good standards instruction for kids. So, WIDA, those are the Wisconsin WIDA, that's part of our rule. They need to be approved and then embedded in, and so that'll be some of our work this year. So, there's your information for approval. Thank you. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Any other questions for Sarah?
What?
No, I just asked if anybody had a question for you.
Do you have any questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Moving on, next one, service update, Abby.
So attached is this year, for policy, we have to bring to the board the report for seclusion, physical restraint, and then we also have to add this, or put this information in DPI. But I do want to address one thing. If you, well, it's on the back for me, but under the total number of students involved in the incidents, it's actually 4 this year, and last year was 7, and then total number of students with disabilities involved in incidents is 4, and it was 5 last year. So I'll make a change and get the new report to Alicia for that, but that, I know it's that, so. Question?
Okay. Thank you, Abby. All right. Next item, business update. Hey, Dave.
Just like you just from out of nowhere.
My turn?
Yep.
So happy to see you.
So,
For all of us?
yeah. So, this is a budget check-in, and we'll talk about compensation a little bit. Thank you, Lori and Bruce, for updating this from action to information. That's what it is, informational. So that document you have is a summary budget that you see periodically when we talk about the big picture. It's a summary of the expenditure functions, the revenue sources, updated with our current information as it stands now. So I'll run through a few of those things, and then we'll talk a little bit about compensation, and then we'll also talk about some of the Fund 80 impacts on levy, because that's something that we had talked about previously that also is incorporated into this budget. So the you can see the 23-24 budget is on the right-hand side column. The preliminary budget for 24-25 is to the left of that. Expenditures on top, revenues on bottom. Some of the biggest factors impacting this preliminary budget are our updated estimate for the revenue limit. That amount is increasing. We're also increasing our interest revenue on district earnings throughout the year when funds are in the district accounts. We've updated the open enrollment trend both in the expenditure and the revenue side. So an increase on the expenditure side and a decrease in the revenue side. And additionally, in the revenue component at the bottom, the federal funds have been reduced because we claimed all of our ESSER grant through last year. We're done. And Title I was also reduced for the upcoming year. On the expenditure side, through June, we have a turnover savings for staff where when positions are refilled, sometimes the new employee costs more, sometimes they cost less. The net thus far is less. There's still some positions that aren't filled, and some benefit elections aren't known yet either, so that will still have some ongoing impact. The health insurance renewal increase is added into that. We got a renewal of 3% with a second year cap, so that's incorporated into this. Additionally, the middle school athletics and activities transfer from that, funding that program, all those programs through Fund 10 to Fund 80 is incorporated in this. We have a pretty good sized savings in the operations related to a contract agreement that we came to with Blue Ribbon, where we anticipated a significantly higher renewal year over year than what we ended up agreeing on. And there's a little bit of adjustment also today for some of the commercial insurances, the unemployment insurance, and so forth. We have a Safeway increase, a transportation increase built in, an estimated amount. We also have the SRO funding moved to Fund 80 built into this. And a little bit of utilities update as well. So all of those things, all of those components that we look at on an ongoing basis throughout the year, this is where we're at right now in this snapshot of the budget. This is what it looks like right now. And you can see the net surplus there at the bottom
based on this current status of about 340,000. So, any questions on all of that?
You said Blue Ribbon came in lower than expected. You have an estimate put in for Safeway, but we are not confirmed with Safeway yet?
Correct, yep.
And what about Tahoe?
Tahoe doesn't come into play in this budget,
Okay.
but we do have an agreement with them.
Because it's fund
It's a
favorite.
fund favorite, yeah.
Okay. But we do have an agreement with them?
Yes. Yeah. This is essentially the revenue limited funding areas here, Fund 10 and 27. So if you turn that page over, you can see some of the costing, options, both the cost estimate overall and the percentage increase for that option based on returning staff only and the wage totals year over year. So that's the WERC method, which all the districts use when they compare. You can see there's a range here. I didn't go above steps and 3%. The minimum that I looked at was steps only. Last year, if you remember, we had a mixed application where not every group got the same thing. Percentages were different. Admin got steps only. So this year, this is all groups within funds 10 to 27. Again, the revenue limited groups. The options with the steps and a percentage include the percentage added to the new hires. Because if somebody's already agreed to come in at a step and lane amount, that amount will change next year if we add a percentage to it, or rather this year. So all of that is built into this. The percentages, again, are the method that's used statewide to compare. Last year, our overall percentage for these funds 10 and 27 staff was 2.82%. This year, the options range between 1.45 and 4.38. And as we've talked about previously, you know, the CPI is high and has been high. It was higher last year. And we know that staff, in many cases, we're hoping for more. And so this is a range for us to consider and look at as we go forward. We can adopt and approve compensation at any point, but depending on what direction you're interested in going, we have to then consider what that means for what we would look at in the future, depending on some of our big factors for our revenue. And I'll get into that a little bit too when I talk about the revenue limit, but you know, on the flip side of that page, again, on the revenue side, if we're looking at what we expect our revenue to increase by right now, some of our biggest assumptions are maintaining a stable pupil count from last year to this year. If that were to decrease significantly, then the revenue would decrease and vice versa. So going forward, it's not things to consider going forward, as always for us. What are our pupil counts doing? What's open enrollment doing? What's the state doing for the budget for us to calculate within the revenue limit? And all those things taken into account, we can select any sort of path to go here, but we have to be prepared to deal with what does that look like the following year? What does that look like with the next state budget? And I guess I'm speaking pretty generally here, but do you have questions specifically about what you have there and what I've reviewed?
I'm not sure I overviewed correctly when we went through the original budget, expenditure, general fund, whatever. Did you say you have a number increase from our insurance that you've included in here? Did we get that?
Medical, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's,
And we have all of our other insurances as well.
so everything, so that, do we get an increase then, I'm guessing?
Yeah, it was about 3%.
Okay.
Because we had a 2-year agreement, right? And we had a cap built in.
Well, no, this is a 2-year agreement now.
Oh, it's 2 years.
3% now, it's capped at 12% next year.
Did you use the same snow removal numbers from last year?
Well, it's a good question, Ian. This is, again, based on the budget, so actually we are gonna use that same budgeted amount because that's a median number. But yeah, we were under this year, for sure.
You said something about how we currently still have some openings. How did you figure that into this budget?
So we use just a placeholder number.
A placeholder being,
For teachers, I think it's BA 36, step 4.
okay,
And we assume family health and dental. And obviously that's a big assumption, right? That's a $20,000 difference. Could be. So we use a placeholder because sometimes those numbers are higher and sometimes they're lower. And that's where I'm saying this will tighten up as we hire these positions and as we know their benefit election.
So, I know we've talked at one point about some other positions or options or things the district. For Shannon, your thoughts on things you'd like to add or increase in the budget, I'm sure, other than just compensation? How do we go about discussing those items before we approve or make a anything with this budget?
Yeah, so I think what you're looking at is kind of our version of step 1, putting some information in front of you and kind of taking a look at what is our best estimate right now today in terms of kind of the pot of money we're working with. You know, you've heard me say before, compensation remains my biggest priority. You know, looking at the options you have in front of you, you know, 3 of those options are above what we say on the other side of the sheet of paper that we have to work with, right? So there's some big discussions there of, you know, potentially looking at running at a deficit for a year or 2. As Dave mentioned, you know, still a huge question mark of what's happening with the next state budget. We're already starting to hear some rumblings of, in a good way, of having them tackle special education funding. So if that reimbursement increased, that would be a huge benefit to every district, unlike kind of what happened last year. So I think, you know, in the next month or so, we'll have to have some big discussions about what are the priorities. So as you can see, obviously, right now, even if we went with, you know, steps in 3.5 to get, or even steps in 2.5, you know, there's nothing left over to be able to add some of those other positions. So what does that look like, right? So as Dave said, I think in the coming weeks, we'll be able to dial into some of those few remaining variables that we just don't know yet. Hiring is obviously a big one, to be able to kind of drill down exactly where we land for 23-24. And then we'll have to have some decisions, because if we end up, for example, deciding to potentially run at a deficit, and state funding doesn't turn out to be what we hope it is, you know, then we're kind of back to having some discussions, knowing well ahead of time that might mean reductions, that might mean an operational referendum. You know, there's some bigger things just to kind of think about and look at. So there's obviously some options sitting in front of you right here that are well within our budget, where we wouldn't necessarily have to look at going deficit necessarily, but so it's a good start, a better position than we were in last year, but still some big decisions if we want to continue to focus on paying our people and paying people well.
And Dave, so you're saying we're gonna come in pretty much right on budget? That's your,
For 23,
$4,800 for
24,
this year.
There's a lot of variance. We'll look at it again once we've closed the year, and we're working on that now through this month and into August. But there'll be a lot of examples of areas that were over and areas that were under. So, yeah, as of the last time we talked about it, it was looking like it was coming in on close.
So with our fund balance being 20%, is that where we want to be? Is that where we should be?
Higher is always better as far as the benefits that it gives the district opportunity to take advantage of. But our fund balance policy is 15 to 25. Some of our neighbors have extremely big fund balances. I think statewide 20 is not uncommon. And as Shannon said, this is a check-in. It's a snapshot of where we're at right now. We usually do it in June. And this year, we pushed it back to this first meeting in July, but it's a snapshot. We'll actually approve a budget in September at the budget hearing annual meeting. So we'll keep talking about it until then.
So this won't come back on the 22nd to approve this preliminary?
No.
This information. And even September isn't the final budget. The original budget, the final original budget is approved in October. And even then, we can still amend it after the fact if we need to, as we did this year.
That's after your third Friday count?
Correct, yeah.
You mentioned that last year we did not use the same percentage for every employee group. And I don't see anything in your options that address that kind of scenario.
Meaning, do something like that again, or meaning make it up, or what are you asking?
You think a higher percentage for support staff?
Well, I'm just, I've said this in the past, that, 3% for a higher paid employee is way more money than 3% for our lower paid employees. And I was just wondering if there is any, if you could provide us any options where the percentages were not the same across every group.
Certainly we can do that, yep. I think last year, support staff and supervisory support staff both ended over 5%. Teachers were 2.4 and admin was 1.5.
You guys have any other questions?
So the other thing to touch base on then relates to the levy. Because two components of this are moving funding of some things that are in Fund 10 now to Fund 80. And so within the revenue limit calculation, one of the biggest components is what is the property value doing. So again, if we're assuming some of the other variables like student count remains the same, which is what we're doing in this calculation. If we say that, first let me say the last 5 years we've had double-digit property values increase. Last year was 15%. If we assume, I think conservatively 8.5% increase for this year, with our DPI July 1st state aid estimate also factored into this, then adding $100,000 in levy will add 6 cents per $1,000 of property value in tax. That'll increase the mill rate by 6 cents.
6 cents per thousand or per
thousand.
ton?
Per thousand. So if all this budget that we talked about is using this whole levy amount, this whole revenue limit amount, so we're using the full extent possible, and we include our debt service, which was the previously sold bonds for all of our remaining referenda, and we add a brand new levy for $150,000 for Fund 80. Our mill rate goes last year from 7.21 to this year 6.88. So if you take out that $150,000, you increase that by 9 cents. So I just want to give you an example of most likely an estimate of 8.5% of value is low. But if it is that amount, then this is what that looks like. We're still adding dollars to the levy, but the mill rate is still decreasing in this scenario. Any questions on that?
So in your hypothetical scenario, 6 cents per thousand would be $6 per 100,000?
Multiply by 100, yeah.
No. Okay.
All right, circling back as far as direction, so we weren't looking this year at differentiating again in percentages, Lori. Is this something that you want to see more about?
You mean, are you asking me if I can?
I'm asking, well, kind of the school board, like all of you together. Is this something you want? I can, work out any sort of scenarios. We were coming forward with just a flat at this point, but if you're saying, no, we want to see something different, that's what I'll spend time on.
I'm okay with a flat across the board. We differentiated last year, so I'm okay going back to flat percent across.
I think the intention was to at least compete with Dairy Queen, with some of the support staff. I don't think we got there.
I don't think we did either.
I'm comfortable keeping it flat across the board personally. Yeah, I think some of it was to try to help some of those areas last year, but then I think it also gave perception to some groups. I mean, yes, some got higher, but some didn't get any but the steps. So I think keeping that flat is what I would prefer.
We're gonna be meeting again next week, so we can talk about it again if people wanna think about it.
Yeah, we don't, I just wanted to get the
Yeah,
sense
I don't
of
want you to
what
do
you're
all the
thinking.
work
We don't
if
need to do
people
it.
aren't, I'd rather.
I'm
For now.
fine with, a flat rate right now. I get it too, percentages, but still, I mean, it's. It makes sense, a flat rate. Something different last year. I wanna make sure we're looking at, I guess, all options too, Shannon. I mean, I know there's positions, and I know there's other things we've looked at and talked about, and I wanna make sure we're visiting all those, and if this is your number one priority, this is it, but are we looking anywhere else in that budget to try to accommodate maybe some of those ads you were looking for at some point? Is there any other spots, like, I don't know, I've seen some, we've had some purchases, you know, could we do that, that maybe comes down on our general fund, that maybe increases some of the budget, I don't know, I'm just looking at, instead of putting it into a budget for the year, it's part of the general fund decrease maybe, on like one-time purchases, that are maybe done within the budget. If you get what I'm saying?
Not really.
I don't either. I know,
Well,
sorry.
No, I'm just looking like, if we have $4 million in our fund or whatever, our fund balance, I guess it decreases our number if we had it, so like.
So that's like, that's a snapshot on June 30, right? It goes up and down throughout the year.
Right.
And so cash flow, if you were to take that snapshot at the end of November, it'd be a real small number.
Okay.
Right, so like, it goes up and down throughout the year. We
Yeah.
have just gotten a bunch of revenues, plus we're booking all of our revenue yet to be received that is applicable to last year as of June 30. So I'm saying like our August tax revenue payment from the county. All that is booked into June 30th. And then from that, we take out all the expenditures, current, all the liability. And so that's a snapshot in time, 4 million, 20%.
Yeah.
But that changes throughout different points in the year.
Yeah, I guess I just want to make sure we're looking at all options here within either what our budget is and positions we're going to add in compensation that
Yeah.
this is the route we want to go, and we don't want to add, you know, library media specialists or
Right.
teachers at different buildings because of how things work out.
And I think
Plus
that's, like, you know, you jump in and take over if you want, but this is what we talk about too at admin, when we say, where are the things that we need to support what we're doing here, how we're educating the kids. And a lot of times it's like, we could really use some of those positions that went away to come back. And Shannon is very good at saying, well, that would come at the cost of compensation right now. That there's a trade-off in the limited resources that we have and how we spend them. So that is something that is talked about, you know, anytime we have that conversation.
Yeah, I would say you hit it on the head. It's kind of a constant push-pull of trying to figure out what's the biggest priority. But we will keep talking about it and continue to have some dialogue at the admin table for sure. Because there's, you know, we've talked how many times about JK, right?
Once or twice.
And, you know, sitting here today, the second, I couldn't justify adding another half-time teacher, but a month from now, you know, that's kind of been the trend, right? So, a lot of variables still, but.
All right, any other questions for Dave on the preliminary budget? Anything else from you, Dave, on that one?
No, shoot me an email if you have a question or give me a call.
Do you want to touch on the SRO statement that's on there?
Oh, yeah. So this was per DPI when we called them about this, and Shannon and I talked to the head of DPI Finance. He said, you know, what you're doing makes sense. If this is what your school board wants to do, this is the direction they want to go, they absolutely can, and this qualifies. In the case of the SRO, you don't want to have some portion in Fund 10 and some in Fund 80. You say, we're not funding that anymore in Fund 10, we're funding that in Fund 80, fully. And in our case, the discussion was, we wanted to know if it was possible to go from the limited agreement we have now to a full week agreement during the school year. That was the context under which we had that discussion with him. And so this is his recommendation. He said, you say you're eliminating it in Fund 10, and you're funding it out of Fund 80. And then that gives us the authority to move forward and to say, and when we set our levy, we're levying for this purpose.
And this will come back to the regular session.
It could come back as a motion if you'd like, yes.
Do you want it tonight?
No, this
Next, yeah,
No.
okay.
Yeah, it doesn't need
We will set the levy in October, so it's a logistical step. We just wanted to be clear, this is how they said to do it, and this is the plan to do it then, and then we'll have the dollar amount finalized for that levy.
Okay, so we'll approve it at the next meeting. All right, any other comments, questions for Dave?
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks
Thanks,
Dave,
Dave.
thanks for sticking around. All right, Shannon, superintendent report.
Okay. All right, I know it's 9:15, so thanks for sticking with me here. All right, so I'm going to start with professional hours recommendation. So this is going to be the first of a couple things over the next month or so that I'm going to bring before the board regarding looking at some handbook changes. And these recommendations really have come from trying to get as much feedback from staff as possible regarding when we're having conversations about compensation. What, in addition to compensation, are some things that staff might find valuable as we're having a lot of discussion about retaining, recruitment, and frankly valuing the professionals that show up here every day. So starting tonight with a memo recommending a change to the handbook regarding professional hours. So I'm sure by now you've read the memo, and inside the memo is draft handbook language. There's not a ton of change, but essentially allowing the flexibility for staff to be able to arrive to work and leave work at the start and end of each day based off of what they feel best meets their needs. Knowing that there will still be some parameters around this, of course. Principals during back to school week would have some conversations with their staff and kind of outlining in general, kind of the start and end of the day. For example, at the elementary school, we can't have 15 staff running in at 7:59 because we have students arriving well before that. So having some conversation at the building level about some of those expectations, but we know that we have a lot of staff right now that show up to work at 5, 6 in the morning. And at the end of the day, frankly, once kids are gone and off on the buses, could be ready to go because they've put in a full day and they've done what they need to do. And right now, there's a little bit of flexibility in the handbook where you have to set up kind of a personalized plan essentially with your principal. And this frankly would get rid of that and allowing our staff autonomy as professionals to be able to determine how they kind of put in their workday. As I mentioned, some of the expectations, staff would still be expected to attend all scheduled meetings such as staff meetings, IEPs, 504s. That may go past 350, but the expectation would be obviously staff would be there for the duration. And there could be meetings before and after school, just like most professional organizations. There's not necessarily a defined, this is the exact minute your school day ends and this is the exact minute that your school day begins and ends. So as you can see at the bottom of my memo, this was something that I surveyed staff about, certified staff obviously in particular, and you can see the results of that survey. I did have a few staff come to me afterwards and just ask some questions specifically about staff meetings and IEP meetings and those kinds of things. But if you click on the link kind of embedded in the memo, you can see, as I mentioned, the changes are really minimal. If you look at letter C, it kind of gets rid of the start and end times specifically for Monday through Thursday and Fridays and adds in the language in yellow. Again, this is kind of one of a few things that I want to bring to the table. This specifically came out of our rounding conversations that Trish and I had with staff in the spring, really getting people, creative of thinking how else can we honor the work of our professionals as we continue to really want to talk about this profession as a professional organization, and these are some ways I think to do that. At a different meeting, I'll be bringing some information and recommendation about looking at paying out for sick days upon retirement. Also looking at potentially reclassifying sick days versus personal days, so some more to come. But these things aren't kind of just pulled out of nowhere. This is really driven from getting feedback and input from staff around some things that they find valuable in addition to compensation. So happy to answer any questions. Certainly not looking for approval tonight, just a first reading.
I'm guessing you've already talked with the administrative team,
Mhm.
principals about how they be making sure, like I said, people are in the building in the mornings and it's not a issue.
Yep, so,
I guess in the mornings are probably aren't the
We are running on the assumption that obviously as professionals, people will be here when they need to be ready for the day. If we run into an issue where, for example, a staff member is kind of flying in by the seat of their pants repeatedly, then that would be an individual conversation with that principal and staff member. We don't see those things now, but again, I think it's an easy win for staff to be able to provide some flexibility. And again, kind of that autonomy piece is honoring them as professionals, so.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood this because I thought this also included when certified staff had prep time. So for example, if a certified staff member had first hour prep, could he or she arrive prior to the second hour starting?
No, we would expect staff to be there prior to the school day officially starting.
Okay.
Because oftentimes, potentially during that prep, there's subbing, there's meetings,
Well,
there's,
that's what I
those
was
kinds of
wondering
things.
about
So,
was
no,
the
even if,
session.
prep at the end of the day wouldn't mean now you can leave at 2:30. So
Okay.
you'd still be expected to be there for the duration of the workday. Just trying to redefine, what that might mean, because, and I know you know this from firsthand, we have staff members that arrive at 6 a.m. And by 3:25, they've put in full day and they're ready to rock, they're ready for the next day. And certainly not that people don't find things to do, but as you're hanging around until 3:50, where as professionals, you've done what you need to do, off you go, so. Other questions about that for now? Okay. So the Market Johnson payments, I don't really think this needs action. Dave and I have had a lot of conversations about the best way to provide you as a board information if you're interested regarding the payments going out for referendum items, and how to ensure that we're getting Market Johnson payments to their bills on time, frankly. And so this is really just more awareness. Technically, because the referendum was already approved, the board doesn't need to actually formally approve the invoices. That's already been done. It's kind of just been past practice, so that's the way we've been doing it, and we don't need to change that necessarily. But you're going to see from now on just a running agenda item, so we don't run into, oh shoot, Market Johnson gave us an invoice on Friday at 4 o'clock, and now it's too late to add it. That we'd like a little bit of flexibility to be able to kind of add those as they come in, but still want to maintain having those on the agenda, just like they are right now. This kind of came up because Market Johnson, they were behind on a couple bills because they were sending it to the wrong people. They still had some old contacts, so Rhonda wasn't getting it, I wasn't getting it, and so maybe you saw, and I know Bruce, you asked me about this too, there's a couple bills that were all the way from April. So we got that part kind of figured out, and then we were trying to work with them to figure out how do we make sure they get what they need, but also ensuring that you as a board, if interested, you're able to see those invoices coming in and out. So I guess it turned into more just informational that you're going to see a running agenda item every single agenda. At the last minute, there may be nothing on there, and there might be 6 bills on there. It just kind of depends. So
the attachment of the bills may
Yeah.
come
Yep.
later.
Yep. So hoping that because it's unpredictable, right? We don't get a bill every Wednesday at noon. It's coming in kind of at all times of the week. So we want to make sure that you have the info, but I also don't want to be tied to, well, the agenda already went out and now we can't add it, and now they're behind 2 weeks when they're looking for payment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So more just informational. All right, letter C is the reading specialist report. So Mindy Shoup put this report together. Due to the timing of this being kind of by the 4th, she was not available to be here, but between myself, Pam, and Sarah, happy to answer any questions that you have. But so this is required by policy. As you can, when you open up the memo, you can see 2131.02. Reading specialist provides basically an evaluation of the district's reading curriculum on an annual basis. Background information and terminology, that's something that Trish started adding a couple years ago just to kind of refresh everybody's memory of when we use certain terms, what are we actually talking about. And then looking at 23-24, So primary through grade 5, continuing to work through Savas and MyView. As you heard, we had a wonderful group here present on UFly, so there was some big information and big work happening in the elementary around that, and I know Pam and her team can certainly speak to the huge benefits of bringing that program on board. At the secondary level, our teachers continue to navigate through StudySync as their main resource, continuing to use our PLC time to collaborate on priority standards, interventions, really kind of diving into formative and summative assessments. I know the middle school, for example, this year did a lot of work around common formative assessments, and also trying to really dive into some of the tools we have available, looking at literacy, such as EduClimber, to dive into data and using that to be able to help guide some decisions that are happening in the classroom. Title I, so I'm going to let Pam kind of speak about that because she's more the Title I expert than I am.
What am I, okay,
Right,
so.
Pam? There you go.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Title I, so we shared our annual review presentation that went out. It's also on the website, when the website's not under, I mean, it's there, but I think you gotta click through under construction. I'm sorry, Shannon, like what exactly, I'm kind of.
Nope, I think the big thing is just looking at the
it's linked
attachment.
right there, the
that we have to
attachment.
do an annual review every year.
So we survey parents, we survey staff. We have to use our, all of our data to make sure, like, how are we doing? Like, are our kids growing? We do our needs assessment for the following year.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And the last part of the report really talks about Motion 57, Act 20, our elementary staff put a ton of work in this year, going through our top 10 teacher tools. They basically did half of it this year. They'll finish the rest of the half next year. And with all of the Act 20 legislation kind of officially going into effect starting this school year, starting January of 25, all students in grades K-12 will have to participate in a universal screener.
Only K3, not K-12.
Oh, did I say 12?
You did.
Oh my
and
gosh.
it is not K-12, thank God.
It is 9:30, so sorry. Okay, K3, it says it right there, thank you. And so still working on determining what exactly that screener will be. I know, there's a big task force at DPI figuring all of that out. So more information to come on that, but that will be something that not only our district obviously, but every district will be engaging in. And then looking forward to getting the rest of our state assessment data. So we have ACT, we have pre-ACT. Sarah just shared today forward assessment data, hopefully by the end of the month.
They're saying by the end of the month we'll have electronic access to it. They won't be publicized, of course, right away, but hopefully by the end of the month we should have at least in online version.
And just today, we were able to access our AP score data as well. So a lot happening. Certainly we can answer any questions that you have. Mindy, her role this year looked a little bit different based off of the reductions from the previous year. She will move back into spending the vast majority of her time back into the reading specialist role this coming year. Looking to be able to use her much more K-12. Obviously last year she was pretty tied into the elementary school, so looking to be able to expand that back to kind of the original intent of that position. So. All right, I will keep moving. So food service report, so this is required per policy 8500. Very similar to what I presented last year. So as you heard Dave already mention, entering back into a contract with Taher. Deb Reveley continues to be our main contact here on campus. No changes to any of our regulations, no changes to our policy. We continue to meet all of the federal regulations in terms of our dietary offerings, all those kinds of things. There really are no changes. Deb continues to do a fantastic job. It's a big job and, great to work with, and we look forward to another great year. So no changes there. And then I had a wellness committee report that I need to click on real quick here. So also required per policy 8510. This is really kind of, I would say, year 2 of diving into this policy in particular. Wellness committee, you've heard me talk about that previously when I've given some updates. You can see we outlined for the year. Rochelle Lindquist has done a great job of really kind of heading this up. The number of times that the committee has met, what the work of the committee has consisted of this year, some of the tasks they completed. Next year will be, we're kind of considering year 3. Year 3 then brings about a few additional things that we have to do in terms of bringing some additional people into the mix to look at the policy, make sure that we are having open discussions about any changes that people might recommend. Right now, the committee has not recommended any changes to the policy, but a lot of really good work has happened in the last 2 years, so we've got a good group of staff that are really engaged and interested in getting some of that work done, which has been awesome. So more to come, but great things happening. As you can see on one of the bullet points, you wouldn't believe how happy infused water weekly in the staff lounges has made people, right? Like, it's been a highlight, so promoting hydration, which is great. And the last 2 things that I have are memos regarding food requests. So these are things that we bring in front of the board annually. Neither of these things are new. I will start with the one that says food purchases for July and August training days. So this is when we are bringing our PLC leaders, our building leadership teams together for 2 days in July, as well as our new staff on August 6th for our onboarding, or August 6th and 7th, excuse me, for our onboarding. You know, over the course of those days, we provide a lunch, we provide a breakfast, really again, as we're trying to honor as professionals, obviously, but also the community breakfast that Jody Patrick started a couple years ago has become, you know, kind of a staple of our onboarding process. So I also want to kind of put it on your radar as board members if you're interested in attending. On August 7th, feel free, we'd love to have you. Just maybe let me know so we can do a head count for food. But it's great, we have all our new staff there, lots of businesses join. Kind of a nice way to introduce our new staff to the community and what we're all about, and we have kind of a long list this year, so I think it'll be great. But as per policy, these are things that we have to bring in front of the board and just ensure that we get your blessing on. So that was July and August, and then we also have a memo here basically for the year, for the days that we have extended work days. For example, when we have our district leadership team stay after school, you know, those work days typically go till about 6. So we provide light snacks, you know, fruit, those kinds of things. That's a long time, that's a long work day, so providing at least a little bit of something. These things are already allocated within our budgets, it's not new spending. These are things we do every year and bring it to the board at about this time. Not looking for any approval. Let me know if you have questions. And that was all I had. Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions for Shannon? All right. Item 10, consent agenda. Is there anybody who wants to make a motion to approve any or all items?
I just had a quick question with the personnel update. How are we doing as far as open positions? Are there a lot of still open positions out there for the upcoming school year? Are they?
We look at Abby.
We still have 3 special education teachers and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 support staff openings. Okay. Special ed.
6. And last year, is that counting the ones that we never filled last year?
Yeah.
So of those 6, how many were never filled last year?
2.
So right now, just in special education?
So we've got all our math teachers? Oh, good.
And behavioral interventionists?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve item 10, A12, B1, and C1.
You have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in, or any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, general information, we'll have a meeting actually next Monday at 6 o'clock to review the policies on this agenda. And then at 6 here, and then we will have meeting on the 22nd, our regular session, where the rest of these items will then come back in addition to whenever we update the policies. And we'll have a listening session 30 minutes prior to that meeting. District's operations. Ian, start with you. What do you got?
Well, thanks everybody for contributing tonight, a lot. That's kind of
Well, I'd like to thank you and the rest of the PTO or whoever it was who helped you with the sandbox. Yeah. I saw pictures of it. I haven't gone and played in it myself. But I might bring my granddaughter sometime this summer, and the pictures look fabulous. Thank you. And I didn't help with the sandbox. I wasn't sure my construction skills were up to doing that, but I understand that later this summer there'll be an opportunity for spreading wood chips. And I think I can handle that.
That'll
So
be
let us know,
hopefully an update
please.
on the 22nd from Margaret Johnson.
Yeah.
What we're
We're gonna hold you to that, Lori.
Thank you. The Somerset Memorial Scholarship Fund has sold all 300 tickets, and we will be doing the official drawing for the fabulous garden shed at Woodstock Builders on Wednesday at 5:30, and there's gonna be a live YouTube thing, so if you can't go.
Facebook Live.
Yeah, so if you can't be there in person, you can watch. I don't know, something about Facebook. I don't know.
You don't have to be present to win, do you?
No, you do not have to be
No,
present to
no,
win.
no.
No, you'll be
That's why
contacted
we
by
asked
email
for
or
your
phone.
phone numbers.
All right, thanks, Lori. Lacey.
I have nothing.
Yeah, again, thanks for everybody who came, thanks for everybody's shown interest in what we're doing here and we're trying to work through and professionally discussing this topic. That's all I have. Danny?
Just looking forward to Wednesday night's shed drawing from Somerset. Can't wait.
Nothing else?
All right, or take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:30 p.m.
Second?
Second.
Who's that, Matt?
Matt, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.